They're having an argument who's sitting where. That's what's going on now. Live.
There's no seats.
That's right. There's hot regular water, yeah. Yeah, regular, yeah. Okay, everyone. Yeah, pull that down. Azai. Okay. Welcome, welcome. We are now ready to begin. This is going to be part 3 of this incredible discourse we've been learning called Shishm, Heimo, Malochos. 60 are the queens. A verse and Song of Songs. Until now, it was we started this Parshas Va'era. And we learned it Va'era, and then we did not learn Bo because Bo was out of town. And then we learned Parshas B'Shalach. I taught on Friday morning last week. And it's Parshas Yisro. So it's interesting that the mimer, its main application is to this week's Parshas Yisro, because it's a Torah mimer. It comes to explain the greatness of Torah study, of what happens when we're learning Torah. And it's based on a verse in Song of Songs where it says, 60 are the queens, 80 are the concubines, and young women without an end. And God says, yet, even though there is all these women, I'm just attracted to you, to Israel, to the Jewish people. But we learned that the Midrash tells us that the 60 queens and the 80 concubines and the young women without an end is not something that God is dismissing. He's not dismissing them. And then he says, one is my dove. He's not dismissing. The Midrash tells us that the 60 queens, that's the 60 tractates of Talmud, of the Mishnah. The 80 concubines are the Braitot. The Braitot, as we'd explained, the Braisa means the part of the Mishnah that's not part of the Mishnah, that's outside of the Mishnah. That's the unedited version of the Mishnah. And then the girls without an end, the young women without an end, we learned, is referring to the statements of the sages of the Talmud who lived about 150, 200 years after the Mishnah. And they are expounding on the Mishnah to explain the Mishnah. And they have halachic statements and teachings of their own. And we say that they are considered, their statements are not of the same caliber like the Mishnah that is considered God's wife, but rather a more external caliber. So the discourse we're learning, by the way, is in the book of Lekutei Torah, in the part of Lekutei Torah from the Alter Rebbe, the part of Lekutei Torah on Shir HaShirim, on Song of Songs. And we are holding, it begins on Daf Mem, page Mem, which is between 78 and 80, because the way it works over here is that one page is a number and the other page is a Hebrew letter, then a number and a Hebrew letter. So it's between 78 and 80 is Daf Mem. We learned already 2 classes on this. We gave already about 6 hours on this discourse. So it's, for those of you who are joining now, I would highly recommend, I don't say shut down, but I would highly recommend you listen to part 1 and part 2. And you guys will hear part 1, not to the end, almost to the end. So you have to listen the last bit of part 1. Then you have homework to do, listen to the entire part 2. You better take a drive to Tucson. You can listen to the whole thing. And then on the way back, we'll have some news for you already. But for now, you can get this. Okay. We learned already chapter 1 in the discourse. We learned already chapter 2 in the discourse. And we're holding in the middle of chapter 3 on Daf Mem Aleph. That would be this over here in your copies that I made over here. It would be on these copies that I made from a different version. It's on page 170. You have to go a few pages ahead. all the way in the end of page 170, Ushmain Palakshin. That's where we're holding. Eloha Braisis. So let's just do a little tiny recap in the briefest manner possible. We learned in the earlier beginning the concept that the worlds on their own, creation on its own, doesn't capture anything of God. Creation on its own does not capture anything of Hashem. Because the way Hashem creates the world is that he creates it by remaining completely outside of it. He creates it something from nothing without evolving into it. God doesn't evolve into creation. He remains completely above it and he produces it. Now, obviously, when he produces it and therefore he remains infinitely higher. At the same time, he's also within it, but he's infinitely above it. So creation doesn't, and therefore through knowing the creation, exploring the creation, through climbing higher in the creation, through even we're not even touching a crumb of who he is and what he is. But yet God, and we discussed how in that very same transcendence, precisely because he transcends it absolutely, for that very reason, his providence, and he oversees it absolutely as well. Which means there isn't any lesser observation of him or interaction with him with the lower creations than in the higher creations. So if you listen to last week's class, I was discussing the whole idea of a tiny little leaf. How the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that a small little straw that was put on someone's roof in a barn, in some Ukrainian barn, and then the little straw that was put in the roof to close up the roof, and then after a few years it falls off from a wind blows and it like got loose and it flew. Hashem is involved, knows, directs every nuance of the movement of that straw. And in the same way, like he's controlling the largest galaxy. Imagine that when he's controlling the largest galaxy, he's got to make sure that there's no crashing of no planets and no things. There's a comet that's coming. There's an asteroid, an asteroid that's moving out of space. It might hit planet Earth and might destroy the whole thing, right? You would wonder that he's got to really be on top of that. But a little straw coming down and going and blown, as we discussed last week, going out in the field and seeing hundreds, thousands of little leaves shaking of the wind. The wind blows and it shakes. And every single one of them, it's got God's full attention. And at the same time, he's got his full attention on everything. And how can he be so silly? It's so insignificant. It's so tiny. Even a subatomic particle. There's nothing that doesn't have the full. And how can that be? That's because there's nothing important. Because he infinitely transcends everything. And precisely because he infinitely transcends everything, he can at the same time, as a result of that, if he chooses to engage, he can engage in everything with the same importance. The tiniest thing and the most grandeur thing are equally nothing. And because he chooses to want that this is his project, they're both equally important. So he's everywhere and at the same time. And in every little thing, he's completely involved, invest in, but knows it without. It's almost like without being affected by the knowledge. That's another idea that we discussed in the earlier classes. I'm not going to go over it. It doesn't affect his knowledge. He's not impacted by the knowledge. It doesn't change one iota by it. And while he knows everything, it's as if truthfully nothing exists besides him. because it's all nothing. So there isn't even one tiny little bit of excitement or strain or impression upon him from all the things that are happening and from everything that he knows. It's hard for us to imagine such a type of a knowledge that is not impressed by what it's knowing. Because if you're knowing and things are changing, so that means your knowledge is changing, so you're being impressed by it. But it's not that way. He remains completely unfazed, untouched by everything that's going on. Yet he is absolutely on top of every little minutia of minutia of minutia, the tiniest little thing, absolutely on top. Nothing misses it. But the important point is, and the reason for that is because all of creation, it's all based on one idea. That creation, even the thought that he uses to create the world, he creates the world through a thought, even that thought is not captured, is not, when we think something, our thought becomes contained in that which we're thinking, and our thought, therefore, is trapped in what we're thinking, and we're not even free to think something else at that moment. We can only think one thought at a time. But his thought remains infinitely. It's producing the world, something from nothing, without the thought itself becoming ingrained in that which he's thinking. He's like thinking it into existence and remains infinitely above what he's thinking into existence. Not just him, even the thought remains infinitely what it's producing from the thought, remains infinitely aloof from what it's producing in the thought. Really cool idea. And therefore the worlds are meaningless. And yet, he desired, however, to get invested. What we're learning over here is that he's not invested. He's infinitely above it. And therefore the worlds don't have anything of him. And he is not in any way contained in them because he's infinitely above them. And yet he wants a relationship, which means he wants to have a home in this world. And a home in this world he wants means he does want the world should be able to open up and receive who he really is. He does want to bond with us completely. But that does not happen in creation. That happens in Torah, and that happens in mitzvot. What's the Torah? The Torah is not just his thought, but Hashem. It's Hashem. It's not just one thought or one speech or one idea. The Torah is his mind, and the Torah is his will. And when we say the Torah is his mind and in his will, not the Torah is produced by his mind and by his will. The Torah is his mind and the Torah is his will. Creation is only produced by a thought that remains infinitely above the creation it creates. So creation doesn't even have one thought of him, because the thought that's creating the creation remains unfazed and untouched and it's free from what it's creating. It's not contained in that which it's creating. Torah, on the other hand, in essence, is God's everything. It's who he is. It is his deepest self. Last week we learned in the Mimer, creation is only created from Malochos. Malochos is very external. Torah is not his Malochos. Torah is him, not his kingship. It's the king himself. The king's private self, who he is above his kingdom. And And what happened? Oh, obviously, the Torah in its origins, being that it's God, is as godly as God. And if it's as godly as God means it's unfathomable and unknowable, and it's a wisdom and a knowledge that is, there's no number that you can say. It's outside, absolutely outside of any comprehension and any knowledge of anybody or anything, ever, ever, ever. And that's the magic of it. That yet Hashem condensed it into a formula that we could comprehend. So when we're learning it and when we're studying it, we are actually downloading into our head God himself. That's what's happening. We're downloading into our head God himself. We need to understand it with our human minds. He somehow camouflaged it. That's the point. He camouflaged it into a discipline, a science that human beings can understand. And all these are all the halachot that we learn. This is divine wisdom. And now we learn deeper. This idea that he in Torah he descends and does transmit himself, his very transcendental self, into us. This is called the unification of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah. Shekhinah is creation. Shekhinah is the power of God, that the kingship, that's the Shekhinah, Malchut, the kingship, which is the tiny, tiny crumb of godliness that does become the soul of creation and goes into the creation to create them, where God does become impacted from our actions. There is a place where God is impacted by, but that's only a crumb, external crumb of him. That's the Shekhinah. And what does he want? The marriage between his masculine self, which means his true, higher, infinite self, with this crumb of Shekhinah, which is creation. And that's called the yichud. That's why all of Torah and mitzvahs is to create the yichud, the marriage with the unfathomable infinite and boundlessness of God himself into the narrowness of us, of our minds and our understanding, into the narrow channels of creation, into the infinitesimally small nothingness of creation. So he downloads through, but here's the point. The main part when you're learning Torah, we learned. So how does it happen? It happens in the Mishnah. When you're studying, it's in the Torah, but now it gets into detail. What does it mean in the Torah? Marriage is man and woman becoming one. God the man. So the world eventually receives God, but through what? So God's wife, so to speak, that receives him and then translates him down into the world. These are the teachings of the sages, the Torah itself, which is it. That's the Malchut, that's the kingship that receives the Ein Sof and transmits it down into the world. So therefore, he gives something very, very powerful in the last class that we learned, that when we are learning the Mishnah, we're not quoting. We shouldn't be learning Torah like we're quoting something that it says. When we are learning Torah, the right way of learning Torah is to let the Mishnah talk. When we are saying the words, we should not be talking. Because when we are talking, then it's us. Then it's tiny, infinitesimally small little creation. Take all of creation with all of its boundless enormity. Like we discussed last week, I went into a whole discussion about the hugeness of the cosmos. It's crazy how big, but yet it's all nothing. It's all created from nothing. The whole entire thing is an absolute nothing. If we're talking, it's the nothing talking. So what is that? You want to silence the nothing. You want to silence the nothing. You want to allow God to talk. The Mishnah is God talking. The Mishnah is God talking through the vessels of Malchut. Malochos is the Torah. God is speaking through the mouth of Malochos. It's the king's, because it's the king. What is it really doing? It's the king being a king, but what is the king governing with? What is the king governing? The kingship itself is very external to the king. But when the king is governing and he's giving you his governing edicts and laws, and these laws are based on deep wisdom, private wisdom. Very interesting. You can look at a king when there was a king, and the king is running and governing. It's today's Hayom Yom. It's literally today's Hayom Yom. When we learned how do we see Torah? A very, very superficial understanding of Torah is that God created a world. People need to get along. When you have a world, certain issues will come up. Conflicts will come up. If you're going to populate the world with a bunch of people, there's going to be all kinds of disputes and arguments and things that need to be resolved. And God says, let me give you the way I think things should be resolved. So then God is responding to a worldly problem. That means that the entire Torah would mean that it's not about God, it's about the world. God doesn't need this headache. He doesn't care about two neighbors and one guy's carrying a bottle, or two people on the street. One guy's carrying a barrel of oil, and the other guy's coming with his beam, and they have a collision. In God's realms, that's the most ridiculous thing. There's no collision, war. Who cares? That's a silly thing. But God knows that if he wants a world and people are going to happen, it's going to be an accident. Then you have to know how to resolve it. You have to pay. This guy can argue, I'm allowed to go on the street with my barrel. You should have walked. If you're carrying a thing, you should have walked. So the Talmud discusses all the details of it. So we would think that whole issue is a worldly phenomenon, and God kind of decides that he wants to be the judge. So he wants to offer his opinion about our reality. That means the Torah is a response to our reality. So we're learning that that's not what it is. That's completely not what it is. It's not laws that are created from life, like we learn in today's Hayom Yom. The Torah's laws are laws that create life. They are the design in which God based the entire world based on these laws. Not the laws were created to match the problems of the world. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? In our case, these laws have nothing to do with a person with a barrel and a beam. These are the deep, infinite divine ideas. God created our world exactly in this way so that he can share his where there's a possibility of a man with a barrel walking and being hit by a guy with a beam. Why did God? Because he has a message to convey that's deep about him, that's infinitely bigger than the cosmos, that's endlessly higher than everything. And that infinite idea, he's communicating to us in this story. So he creates a world in which he can communicate this idea. So imagine a king. There's two types. Let's put two types of kings. Here's a country that's a mess. And there's someone who decides he's going to clean the country up from his mess. So he wants to take reign over the country to deal with the problems of the country. So then when he gets into power, and he becomes the president, the legislator. He's legislating, and his entire purpose is because he cares about the country and he wants to fix the country. But then there is a king who has very, very, very rich ideas, amazingly rich ideas. And he's not even king yet. He just is a human being with powerful, incredible, crazy ideas. So he builds an empire so he can be a king over it. And he's going to run the kingdom to the benefit of the people, completely to the benefit of the people. But when he's giving his laws, in addition to it benefiting them in their own world, secretly, on a very, very deep person that only he sees and only he knows, he's transmitting to them such a deep science, such a deep philosophy. They might take them 1 billion years to figure out what he transmitted to them. And then, and maybe they'll begin to say, so this is what. So it's not about the laws. It's not about fixing the problems. It's he wants to transmit something. So in the Torah, God is transmitting to us. So the Mishnah is the edict of the king. The king is giving his laws. But what's contained in the Mishnah? The purest, highest, most infinite godliness. So, but here's the important thing. When we are learning the Mishnah, if we're talking and we're just quoting what the Mishnah said, if you hear yourself talking, you're still where? If you hear yourself talking when you're teaching Torah or learning Torah or studying Torah, then you're still within creation. What you really need to hear when you're learning Torah is that you don't hear yourself talking. You hear God talking. Because the Mishnah is the voice of God. And basically, when we start learning Mishnah or saying any Talmud, any passage, anything of particularly Mishnah, because we were learning, Mishnah has a certain quality above the Talmud, higher than the Talmud. The Mishnah is the inner infrastructure of the Talmud. When you're learning the Mishnah, it's a pure transmission of the transcendental, infinite godliness that is infinitely bigger than creation, now flowing and being expressed. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. The Ein Sof is now expressing itself. In other words, the way I was walking on the street this week one day, or Shabbos, I think it was last week, after I taught this on Friday, and it was in my head, this idea, and every time we start learning, we're switching the channel. We're living within the channel of creation, which is the channel of narrow, constricted, limited, defined existence, which is from the ultimate perspective, from God's perspective, we're living in absolute nothingness. From true reality, God is looking, we're in nothingness. Now, to us, it's a big, magnificent world. There's ice cream stores and roller skating rings and malls and airports and coffee shops and libraries and speedboats for nice trips and wars. And I'm looking for all the nice, beautiful things. And all the pleasures and all the this and this, but you realize 70, 80, 90 years until you're too old even, you can't even enjoy these things that much, too much. And then you're reading, sitting around, and it's fartik, it's over. And then it becomes last year's snow. It's gone. It's like a newspaper from, it's meaningless. It's absolutely meaningless. While you're in it, in the little space that you are, you think you're having a good time. You're living it up. You're enjoying yourself. You're right. You're drinking a beer on the back of the speedboat. You understand there? You're in the sun, California sun. You have good music playing, and you're amachaya. But in the ultimate scheme of reality of existence, what is it? It's gone. Because your entire existence is a blip in the universe. Think about it. How much are we in the universe? Planet Earth is nothing in the solar system. The solar system is nothing in the galaxy. The galaxy is nothing in the universe. In the millions of galaxies. You don't even find yourself. If God forbid we would fly out of the galaxy and into the big universe bound, and we would have to start looking for ourselves, you can search for a gazillion years, you won't find. You won't find the entire galaxy. I'm not talking about finding the solar system and find planet Earth and found your address and find this tiny little place called Earth with all these few billion people. I don't care what kind of big shot you are. You can be Bill Gates with a gun. You're also still a big, big nothing. A nothing of a nothing. Existing in a blip of time and a blip of space as a nothing of nothing. Nothing. Oh, you heard it. How far did your fame go? How far? Oh, around the whole world. How? In which direction? How far? How? In this is even in the universe, we're nothing. And if once we say that all the universe, and the physical creation is nothing in the spiritual world, and the spiritual worlds are nothing for higher spiritual worlds, then nothing goes on. It becomes canceled with nothingness a gazillion times. And then we say that the entire project is all nothing. So we can turn, and here's the thing. When we're not learning Torah, and when we're not conveying God's existence, then we are on the channel. We're living in the channel of creation. And if we're living within the channel of creation, we're living in and all the noise we are making, everything that we're experiencing is all inside this bubble of nothingness. But each and every one of us has the opportunity. God gives us a mitzvah. Speak Torah every moment of your life. And you say, seriously, God? You want every minute? Every minute. And God says, speak them and not anything else. He says, God, it's a little pushy. I have my life, no? What do you care? You want me to learn a little bit? I'll learn a Mishnah. I'll set some time. But every minute there's a mitzvah to learn Torah. It almost seems like it's extreme. But now when we're beginning to realize what God is saying, why in the world do you want to live in nothingness when I'm giving you an opportunity to switch the channel? And you're switching the channel, suddenly you're actually switching from your world, which is nothing. You're switching into my reality, and I'm coming through you. And now you are everything. You're infinitely, endlessly higher than the cosmos and the universe, because you are one with me. You're not in the creation that I create something from nothing. You are funneling and channeling my true self. So when I'm speaking through you. My true wisdom. Of course, we have to do that every minute. Why in the world would we choose deliberately to shut that channel and to go back into the nothingness? So those who have the sensitivity can't stop learning for a minute. It's in a sense almost suicidal. It's like it's an obliteration. It's an obliteration of true existence. That's why we say Ki Hein Chayenu. They are our life. This is true life. Everything else is in old time Yiddish, Baba Mises. Baba Mises means grandma tales. It's nothing. What's real? Torah is real. So that's the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, it's God speaking. That's why it says, the last thing we were learning was God says, every time God says, B'chol makom, every place, Asher askir eshemi, that I will mention my name, Avayelecha, I will come to you, Uberechticha, and I will bless you. The simple meaning is, every time that you will mention my name, I will come to you and I will bless you. That means wherever we mention God's name, God comes. So we always say a blessing, we mention God's name. It's very funny because the actual words that it says, it doesn't say every time you will mention my name. It says every time I will mention my name. But it's not so if Hashem is mentioning his name, that means God is talking. Why is he coming to us to bless us? We mention his name. He doesn't mention his name. We're mentioning his name. So it should say every time you will mention my name, I will come to you and bless you. And that's what it means. But it doesn't say, the wording doesn't say kol makom asher tazkir. Tazkir means you will mention. It says kol makom asher azkir, that I will mention. So what does it mean, I will mention? Because every time we're learning, we switch the channel. We're not talking. He is talking through us. We're just allowing the ultimate reality to be heard in our physical space. In our arena of time and space, we're allowing God to speak through us. We just have to be the physical, we just have to be the microphone through which God's voice is spoken through us when we learn. And the less we feel ourselves when we're doing it, the more godlier it is. Just allow God to be real in us and through us. And then you dissolve into the ultimate reality, and then we're one with the ultimate reality. It's Hashem speaking. And why? Because just like the first time we heard the Mishnah, when did we hear the Mishnah the first time? We didn't hear the Mishnah, but we heard the 10 principles that are the source of the Mishnah, the 10 commandments. Who spoke the 10 commandments? God spoke. We heard the 10 commandments spoken directly by God. In those 10 commandments were included, and the truth is, Rashi says, or the Talmud says, we only heard the first 2 commandments. But with the other 8, Moshe spoke. Was Moshe quoting God? A question. Was Moshe standing there? I heard from God that he get. No, that's not what happened. The first 2 commandments, we heard God speak. The last 8 commandments, Moshe was God's microphone into the physical. Because the Jewish people said that when God is speaking, it's too mega. It's too mega. It's so powerful, and we can't. So we got to reduce it a little. So God says, okay, it's the opposite of a microphone. How would you call it? The microphone is to amplify the sound. This came to constrict the sound, to make it humanable. Okay, to make it. So how did God do that? He spoke in Moshe's voice. So when Moshe was saying the other 10 commandments, the other 8 commandments, was Moshe talking? We all knew that Moshe was just funneling into his human voice. Before that, they heard a divine voice. Now they heard the divine voice coming through the vocal cords of Moshe. And that's the reason why by the 10, he asked in the beginning of the discourse, we say, God spoke all the words, lamar, to say. So if you remember 2 weeks ago, we asked the question, in this week's Torah portion, Pashas Yisrael, lamar to say. What does it have to say, lamar to say? Who are we to, usually when it says lamar to say, means to give it over. God spoke to him, he should give it over. Who are we to give it over to? Everybody's there. God is speaking directly to everybody. The people don't have to teach it to anybody else. They were there. And even all the souls of the future generations were there. So why does it say God spoke these words, saying? What happened by the giving of the Torah is that just like when God spoke, God was speaking, no one else. And then when Moshe spoke, God was speaking, not Moshe. He was speaking through Moshe's vocal cords. God says, the whole rest of the Torah that you will later hear from Moshe is me speaking. And the Mishnah, once the rabbis will begin to open up the 10 commandments and the 613 commandments, the entire written law, and explain the oral law, explain all the details, it's still God speaking. It's Hashem himself dictating and commanding the commandments. It's not a human being speaking. These rabbis did not speak their words. What you're basically doing is they are taking us back in time travel. They're taking us back to Sinai, and we're hearing God. It's the expounding. It's like God expounding on what he said at Sinai. But it's him himself expounding. Through who? Through Rebbe Yehuda, through Rabbi Shimon's, through Rabbi Yehuda's vocal cords, through Rabbi Shimon's vocal cords, through Rabbi Meir's vocal cords, through Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's vocal cords, through Rabbi Tarfon's vocal cords, through Rabbi Akiva's vocal cords. All these rabbis speaking, it's God speaking. It's God's voice just coming. It's him, it's his will, it's his wisdom, and it's his voice. And when they spoke the Mishnah, they had no self-consciousness. They were just a funnel to reveal God's wisdom and God's desire and God's. We take it a step forward. Not just Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi, and all these high great sages, but every time I open up a Mishnah, or you open up a Mishnah, and you sit down with the book of Mishnah, and you read when do we begin reading the Shema Ba'arvin by night? That's the first Mishnah of the entire six. When do we start reading the Shema? Who's asking that question? It's God asking the question. When do we start saying the Shema? And the answer God gives. And even though you're saying it, Lamar, God is still talking it. God spoke, the same voice that spoke at Sinai is now in your mouth. It is speaking through you and in you when you're saying the Mishnah. And God is saying, at the time when the Kohanim go eat their truma, which is after the sunset and the stars come out, that's when you say the Shema. And then the second opinion is also God's second opinion. When it says, he says, Tul Chatzos, Rabbi Gamliel, whatever, says Tul Chatzos, Rabbi Eliezer, I'm sorry, says Tul Chatzos, till midnight. No, it says until when. And then they give the various different times until when you can do it. Till the end of the first Ashmura, or till midnight, or to until the morning. All these various different opinions. It's God himself speaking. And so it is every mission. It's basically you're switching the channel to true reality and true existence. Okay. Once we understand the quality of Mishnah, so the Mishnah is the wife. That's why it's called the queen. The queen is one with the king. The people in the kingdom, they're outside the palace. They only know the kingship. They don't know the kings. Talk about the Rebbetzin. Oh, today's a perfect day. The Rebbetzin knew the Rebbe. On ways that no one ever knew the Rebbe. She knew him. On levels that she knew him. She's the Rebbetzin. The Hasidim only knew like Rebbe as Rebbe, but she knows the Rebbe like him. Rabbi Eunuch, it's a good story. Here I'm cheating. I'm going to tell my type of story, so Rabbi Eunuch, Shlomo Eunuch, he was very close to them. And he was once on the phone call on a phone call. He was talking to the Rebbetzin, and he was talking to her about, let me get the story perfectly right, so I don't mess it. Amazing story. Amazing story. Please give me here. No, not this one. Hold it. Where was it over here? Oh, I think it was in the email. Here it was. It was in the email. Give me a second. Give me a second. Mm-hmm. Here it is. Rameir Shlomo Eunuch, he once spoke with the Rebbetzin during the trial of the books before Hey Tevis. And he gave a big sigh because we know that during that time, the Rebbetzin suffered tremendously because it was a fight from her family. Her own sister's son was the one who wanted to take the books, the library away. And it caused the only relative she had was her sister. And it caused a split between her and her sister. It was the deepest pain. And he gave a big sigh, this attendant, Rabbi Eunuch. And he said, soon Mashiach will come and we won't have such problems. So the Rebbetzin answered, Mashiach is already amongst us. We just have to recognize him. This is what she said. So Reb Shlomo saw it was an opportunity. So she says to the Rebbetzin, Mashiach gefindt sich bei euch in Stub. Mashiach is found in your house, by you. Go tell him that he should reveal himself. So we'll be already pater from all tzaros. We're not going to have. Once she opened the door and she said, he's already amongst us. You just have to recognize him. So he said to her, well, if that's the case, we know he's in your house. So you go talk to him and tell him. And so she says to him, she insisted, no, you have to say it to the Rebbe. So he said, who am I? I'm a little child, Shloima. I'm a kid. He says, I'm Shloima. And she answers, if you will tell him, he will listen. In other words, I can't tell him. You have to tell him. Yes. But why am I saying this? The wife knows who the husband is really. She knew. The people outside have. So the queen is one with her husband. So the Mishnah is the queen. It receives the Ein Sof completely, and it transmits it in its perfect light. Now we continue. So now let's understand, what does it mean, the 80 other concubines, which it says are the unedited version of the Mishnah. It's the Braisa. Shmoin and Pelakshim and the 80 other concubines, Elu Braitas, these are the Braisas in Inyan. By this. A Braisa, the Braisa who levara Mishnah, the Braisa comes to explain the Mishnah, but Pratius Yaisa. It comes to break things down a little bit more in detail. It should be understood also to students that are not as great. See, the Mishnah was a very concise and condensed version of all the principles of Torah. That's what the Mishnah is. It's the very, very most sharpest, clearest, but condensed, compressed principles. In every principle, there are a lot of details. And when you're just reading the principles, so you get an idea, but you don't get. So very, very sharp, great minds are able to get a principle and figure out all of its applications on its own. You know, as a very bright person, all you have to tell them is a principle, and they can deduce all the extractions. But people that are not so brilliant, you can't give them the $100 bill. You have to break it down into small change. You have to break the thought down into details. That's what the Bryce is. The Bryces are a longer version of the Mishnah with much more breakdown. So it's not, and that's what we mean in the unedited version, but there's much more information in a Bryce. The Mishnah is a very sharp condensed. So we're going to understand now that it's not only in terms of Mishnah is more compressed in the Mishnah because it's the purest of the pure, of the essential, basic, more fundamental principles of Torah, of God's will. God dwells in the Mishnah. The Mishnah transmits the infinite in a very open way. But once we're opening up and we're going to the Brises, it's a lower form of teaching because it's small change. It's no more the $100 bill. It's the 20s and the 10s and the 5s. It's breaking it down. But precisely because it breaks it down more, you're losing some of the brilliant light that's in the Mishnah. Spiritually as well. In the Brisa, the divine presence, the infinite, is not as present and as sharp as he is in the Mishnah. You're getting godliness with a little more static. It's not as present as he's going to explain. So again, what is the Brisa for? That could be the reason why when you study for a neshama, someone passed away, we study Mishnayot. You don't study Talmud for them. You can study Talmud, that's nice, but the main study for a person who passed away is the Mishnah. Because we say Mishnah is the same letters as neshama. Because the point of studying is to download the Ein Sof into that soul. Where are you getting the purest teaching that is a pure, clean window, and where the godly is fully shining? In the Mishnah. And he's going to explain why the Brisa does not have that. So first he's going to explain technically what the Brisa is. So he says, Kadei Sheyuvin, the purpose of the Brisa was to break it down, Kadei Sheyuv, and it should be understood Gamla Talmidim, also to the students, She'enim Gedolim Kol Kach, that are not of the same caliber, they're not so great. Ki Lachachamim Gedolim, because the great wise men, Hayadai B'Mishnah L'chud, the people who lived 200 years earlier, they didn't need the Brisa. For them, the Mishnahs were good enough. They learned the Mishnah and they knew it all. Who was the Brisa? Who was the Brisa written for? The rabbis came and looked at the Mishnahs and said, okay, it needs a little bit more. You got to break this down a little bit more to see the ramifications, the details. So they started dissecting the Mishnah and they created the Brisas. Shebe'emes, because in truth, nirmaz b'Mishnah, in the Mishnah, it is hinted to kol pratei adinim shebebrisa. All the specific laws of the Brisa are already there in the Mishnah. The Mishnah contains, just like in $100 bill, you have the 520s. They're all inside of it. Kamaimar Ilfa, like Ilfa said, Ilfa was one of the sages of the Talmud, and what did he say? Mi ikam mida bebrisa. Is there something in the Brisa, the loy pashtina loy mimasnitzan, that you can't find in the nuances of the Mishnah? If you learn the Mishnah very carefully, in the tiny little nuances of the Mishnah, you can see every law of Brisa. Mishnah has everything. Mishnah contains the entire will of God of Torah. But most people don't see it. Ilfa, as he's going to say in a minute, Ilfa, because he's such a brilliant scholar, he can see all the expansion that all the rabbis expounded on in the Brisa. He can show you where it is in the Mishnah. But most people couldn't do that. As he says, Rak Heino Ilfa, only this sage called Ilfa, who his name itself, the Alter Rebbe is very gewaldig. The Alter Rebbe says, take a look at his name. His name is already showing you what kind of brilliant scholar he was. Dafka Shoy Chacham Gadol Ilfa, who was a great wise man, Yachol Lahavin Berem, as he was able to pick it up from the nuances of the Mishnah, from the tiny hints of the Mishnah, he was able to see all the elaborate details that the Brisa would talk about. He can see. Ushmoy Meyadolav, and his name testifies on him. Lashon, the word Ilfa is from the word A'alef Chachma. A'alef Chachma means I will teach you wisdom. From the word Aleph. Aleph means I will teach. So this means a very, very high level of wisdom. He attained a very high level of wisdom. He can take a peek at the Mishnah and see all the Brisa in it. I will Shar Talmidim, but people with average minds, Lo Yavinu Klal, when they learned the Mishnah, they did not see all the detail. Even in his generation, and definitely when the hearts when the heart shrunk, that means the more the exile kicked in, the farther we went into the darkness. Spiritually, we became weaker and of a lesser caliber, and therefore our ability to experience the divine wisdom and divine knowledge became far more limited. So we need much more elaboration in order to see the details. So they needed to explain the Mishnah with more detail. It's like when a teacher is teaching a student. When a teacher is sitting with his own colleagues, when his own friends, when the Alter Rebbe is sitting with the Talmidim of the Magid and he wants to share a thought, he can do the entire mimer. He can do it in 3 lines. The Alter Rebbe can say a short teaching, and it can. His friends, the Alter Rebbe's colleagues who sat by the Magid, the big tzaddikim like Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, you can share these thoughts that the Alter Rebbe has to spend pages and pages and pages explaining to his colleagues. He can give it over very short and concise. Because in one short concept, they see it all. But when you're bringing it down to simple people, you gotta really, 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 really break it down. In order to be mashpia, in order for it to be influenced, in order for the student to be able to receive, you got to give it first of all in tiny bits. Ulekatzer, and you have to say it very short. That means you have to break it down small little pieces, and then each piece you have to make it brief in a one-liner, and then slowly. Reminds me of my daily mimer that I teach. Make this powerful, incredible mimer and just give little tiny slivers, tiny slices. Ulahalim, and to hide. Oimeka muskal. When you're trying to deliver it to students that are not yet ready, someone was saying that the real expertise of a teacher is not what they say. It's what they don't say. It's the really hard part of preparing a class. The really hard part of preparing a class is to restrain yourself and say, this information is just gonna zap the brain of my students. So I'm gonna keep this information. I want to say it, but I'm not saying it. It's contained in what I'm teaching, but the student will have to read it 20 times until they'll see the depth of it. But if I tell it to them right now, I'll fry their brain. So better not to say it. So that's what the teacher needs to do. She has to reduce it until the recipient is able to take it. However, to a much higher caliber recipient, the teacher can give it direct, right? And this is the meaning of the word brisa. Brisa means from the word bara in Aramaic. Bara means on the outside. It means you're taking the teaching out to the outside. People that are not in the inner circle. You're taking it outside to the people that are farther out of holiness. People that are farther away from godliness. So levar megufa, taking it outside of your own body. The alkain, and therefore ein hagilui oirein sof kol kach bedinei habraisa. In the laws of the Braita, the infinite is not as powerfully present in a revealed way as it is in the Mishnah. Because the Mishnah is the condensed inner teaching for the inner circle, who can receive it with all its brilliant light. So in the Mishnah, in those words, is a powerful infusion of pure Ein Sof. But in the Braisa, the light is much dimmer. It's not like in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah is the pure Ein Sof coming down in its purity. But in the Braisa, who behester k'tas, it's more concealed. Kanal b'mashal, like we said in the example, when you're giving over something to a farther recipient, you got to reduce the light. So in the Mishnah, God's light is far more communicated in the open. In the Braisa, it is much more camouflaged. Now, To be able to measure where there is more godly light, you have to be a tzaddik to know that. In other words, to know that there's more brilliant Ein Sof light in the Mishnah than there is in the Brisa. How do you measure that? I don't see the light when I'm learning the Mishnah either, other than knowing that God is the one who said so. Do I see the brilliant light? The Alter Rebbe, when he's learning the Mishnah, he's seeing the Ein Sof. I don't see it. I know it's true. So the Alter Rebbe wants to give us, he doesn't want us only to trust him, he wants us to understand it. So he wants to show us now an example that you can actually see that there is a certain dimming of the light in the Brisa than in the Mishnah that we can actually see. How do we see it? We see it in the literal sense. The reason of the Mishnah, the explanations of the why. The Mishnah gives you God's laws, the basic principles of laws of all aspects of Torah, right? Fine. But the reasons that are for the Mishnah's laws are usually pretty understandable. Obviously, there are certain parts of Torah in which we're told we don't understand the reason. It's just a gezerah. It's a decree. We call it gezerah sakasav, the pasuk decree so. But then there is a lot of laws of Mishnah that have a very good explanation. And the explanation is the explanation of the law of the Mishnah is very, very understandable. I'm going to give an example. Masechta Sukkah talks about a sukkah. So we know that a sukkah has to have a special cover. The special booths that we sit on sukkahs has to have a special cover. The cover needs to be covered with branches and so on and so forth. It's called the schach, the shade that provides the sukkah. And that's the main mitzvah of the sukkah, is the schach on the top. So we know there is a law that a sukkah cannot be, the schach can't be 20 cubits high, which is about 30 feet. And the explanation, and why is it? Because when the sukkah is so high, the walls are providing the shade, not the roof. You're supposed to have the shade is supposed to be coming from the roof. But when you have such tall walls, then you don't need the roof. It would be just as shady because the sun, which is on the side, is being blocked by the walls. For that reason, a sukkah that's more than 20 cubits is not kosher. Because you have to be sitting in the shade and why? Because God, the Shekhinah, where you're sitting in God's shade, encloses himself in the branches, not on the walls, in the roof. And that's understandable. It makes sense. It's logic. Not that why God is in the roof, why Hashem is in the schach and not in the walls. We can explain that. But the concept, it's a very understandable logic that when you have a very tall wall, then the shade is coming from the wall. So we understand why it's possible. So the Mishnah has a clear explanation. And so it is almost in every Mishnah. You can get a clear explanation. However, the Brisa starts to give you nuances regarding the mitzvah of a mitzvah and starts sharing much more details about a sukkah, which some of them don't make any sense at all. Why the law is that way. So in Brises, you're left wondering a lot of times, why is this law like this? And you don't have the explanation. Let's see. Let me give you an example, and then we'll see what. The reasoning of the Mishnah, the logic of the Mishnah, is revealed and explains more than the reasons of the laws of the Bryce. Like by way of an analogy, the law of the Mishnah. Sukkah, a booth. That is taller than 20 cubits. Psula is possible. You can explain, you can find the reason for it. And that's the reason, as we said earlier, because of the shade. Sukkahs, hear these words. Sukkahs ganvach v'rakbash. the sukkah of Ganbach and Rakbash. What does that mean? This is an acronym. It stands for 8 types of sukkahs that are not kosher. And what are they? Gimel stands for a sukkah of a non-Jew, sukkah of a goy. Goyim, a Gentile in Hebrew, is called goy. People think it's sadly it's a derogatory term. It means nations. It literally means Gentiles. But it's not. It was never meant as a derogatory term. It means nations. So the sukkah that was made by a non-Jew is not kosher. A Jew needs to make the sukkah. What's the reason for that? It's the same sukkah. Or Nun stands for Nashim. So what does that mean? A sukkah of a woman? Why is that not kosher? A woman can't put the schach on the sukkah? I never heard that. I have to look up the Mishnah, the Brisa. Maybe you can say because a woman is not obligated in the obligation of sukkah. Because it's one of the mitzvahs that have a time thing. So someone who's not obligated can't create the sukkah. But a woman can't build the sukkah? I didn't even realize this. Never heard that. So I have to check that up. We're going to look it up. And you're in charge to make sure that I look that up. The next one is I need to look up this whole thing. Give me a second. Sukkah Dav Chesamid Beis. I'm going to get him a sukkah because I can't. I'm going to look it up. Where's the bride? Say here. Does it say Amid Aleph or Amid Beis? Let's see over here. Sukkah Ches Amid Beis. Okay, here we are. Taner Rabbanan, Ganvach. What does that mean? Sukkahs Goyim, Sukkahs Nashim, Sukkahs Behema, Sukkahs Kutim, Sukkahs Makom, Kshera. So does he say it's puzzle? Give me a second. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa, Ganvach, a sukkah of Ganvach, which is mnemonic of the following types of sukkahs. Sukkahs Goyim, a sukkah of Gentiles. Sukkahs Nashim, a sukkah of women. Sukkahs Behema, a sukkah of an animal. What does that mean? Sukkahs Kusim, a sukkah of the Kuthians. Sukkah Makom, and a sukkah of any sort, even one inferior to those listed above. Kshera is valid. Provided it is covered in accordance with its law. The Gemara explains a brisa's last clause. What is it meant in accordance with his law? That had to make it for the purpose of providing shade. The Gemara seeks to explain another statement in the brisa. Sukkah makom latuya mai, lasuya sukkahs rakbash, to include a sukkah of rakbash. What does that mean? Taner Rabbanan, for the rabbis taught in a brisa. Sukkahs rakbash, a sukkah of rakbash, which is mnemonic of the following types of sukkahs. Sukkahs royim, a sukkah of shepherds. Sukkahs kayotzim, a sukkah of fig watchers. Sukkahs burganim, a sukkah of city watchmen. Sukkah shemrei peres, a sukkah of produce watchers. So people that are sukkah makol makom and a sukkah of any sort, ksheira is valid. Okay, so they are valid. Okay. Yeah, but it seems to be saying from the Talmud that they are kosher. What did he mean over here? It seems to be saying over here that it is kosher. So what's he saying? The reason is not to be understood. What's not to be understood? A sukkah higher than 20 is not kosher. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry for taking over here a few minutes here. I was reading it wrong. They are kosher. So then what does he mean over here that we don't understand the reason? I'm not sure. Let me go back over here. Maybe the reason of why, I don't know what he means by that. We're learning page 171 and the first column, not the first paragraph. We're holding the first column going on to the. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to look that up and do some more invest. Yeah. We're holding at the end of that. But I'm not understanding what it means. We don't understand so much the reason of this halacha. I thought we don't understand why it's puzzle, but that was a chiddush to me. What do you mean a woman's sukkah is puzzle? A woman's sukkah is kosher. That's why I was shocked. It didn't make any sense to me. So the truth is, even a sukkah that a Gentile made, if he made it for sukkahs, then it's kosher. So again, I don't understand what he means, but let's continue. And for this reason, the Mishnah is called the queen. Va'braisa pilegesh, and the Braisa is called the concubine. Just like by the way of analogy, the king and the queen. Tadir yachad, they live all the time together. The king and the queen is always with her. Mashenkin in Palakshoy, which isn't the case with the concubine, the king goes to her only secretly. Veloy begiloi. So it's not so open. It's not really an open thing. It's not such a Gama Yichud, and then also the times that he's with her is very infrequently. It's just by chance. So he's basically saying the godly flow of Ein Sof that happens in the Brisa is not as as constant as what does that mean? Can you study a brisa one day and God is not in it, then the other day he is in it? That's not what he means. It's not with the same consistency and the same level of divine revelation as the Mishnah. Kamoi came the Mishnah, so too in the Mishnah, Oirein Soif to Oirein Soif Meir Sham illuminates and shines there b'chinas gilui in a revealed way, ubetadira and constant. Ki yadu, as it is known, shehis galus Oirein Soifu b'chachma. The revelation of the Ein Sof reveals himself in Chachma, and the Mishnah is coming from God's Chachma. Elafikach nikreis masnisan malkasan. That's why the Mishnah is called the Queen. Avo braisa, but braisa b'chinas hashpada levar magufa. The braisa is considered bringing the godly light, bringing the divine wisdom further out. And as we discussed earlier, when you want to bring an idea further out, you have to darken the idea, you have to lessen its brightness, and you have to chop it up into small pieces. And when you're doing that, automatically there is much less light. Sham ein agilu kol kach, the revelation is not so much. Rak al yedei hester, it's more concealed. V'lovush, and more obscured. V'tzina, and it's also more concealed. Alke nikra pilakshim, that's why the brisa is called the concubines. Shahayichud, because the unity of the king with the concubines is betzina, is more private, meaning it's hidden. Ubakrai, and it's more temporary. It's more infrequent. Valomos, and that's why, as we said earlier, no one is going to say that you should study the brisas for when someone departs. You study Mishnah. Now, where does an average person encounter brisa? When you study Talmud. When you're studying what we call the Gemara, which is the commentary on the Mishnah, the Talmud brings all the brisa. Even though there are books that have purely brisa in it, but it's not really a common study. What people study is Gemara. When the Gemara tries to analyze what the Gemara is trying to expound the Mishnah. So when the Gemara expounds the Mishnah, the Gemara lays out all the brisas, this brisa, that brisa, and it does comparative analysis. This brisa says like this brisa says this. How this Mishnah must how do we understand the Mishnah based on all these brisas? And based on that, we try to recompose the Mishnah. So that's how we see the brisa. So we study the brisa as part of the Talmud study. But the sharpest and most direct communication with the Ein Sof is when we're learning the Mishnah. Now, V'alamais ein mispar. Now it says in the verse, it says that the king has 60 queens. Now we understand 60 because there are 6 categories of Mishnah, and each one is divided into 10 mesechtos. So these turns into and that's because there are 6 emotions of God. And in each one of category, he's revealing one of his emotions, divided into the 10 sefirot of that emotion. So every mesechta is another emotion of God communicating to us, another side of God's emotions, of God's personal self. But then it says that, and then there's the concubines, and then it says young women without an end. These young women, they don't have a relationship with the king. They don't have an intimacy with the king. They're just there. So what does that mean? So that's the next stage of Torah. What's the next stage of Torah? A level of Torah where you have teaching of the sages, but these teaching of the sages are a little bit more distant than the original teachings of the Mishnah, because they came 200 years later by later sages who did not have such a spiritual capacity. Their teachings are possibilities for God to flow in them, but it does not flow with the same sharpness like it's flowing in the teachings of the Mishnah. Yes. Well, it's you're going down from the 20s to the 5s. Valom, I say mispar, but let's see, and girls without a number. Malochos, these are the laws coming up in the Gemara. Umemrois ha'amorim. These are the teachings of the Amorim. Amorim are the sages of the Talmud, not the sages of the Mishnah. V'nikra alamais, and why they called young girls lashon helem. The word alamais means the concealment, because even though they're part of Torah, but the light, the divine communication, the sound of God at Sinai is not booming in them like they are in the Mishnah. Besula the Ishla Yada, it's like a virgin girl who the man has not known her yet. I mean, she's potential to marry the king. She's like the girls who were taken to Achashverosh's palace, although they didn't have yet their Shaloy Hayadayan Ima Yichud Klal, the Orein Sof has not yet unified with it yet. The Inyan, what does that mean? Talmud, the Talmud, Ikaroi Lohavin Atamim. Let's understand. The Mishnah communicates not the reasons. The Mishnah communicates the law. The Mishnah is coming to tell us the law. The Talmud wants to know the why. Based on the why, when you understand the why, you get to understand many more laws. Because when you understand the reasoning of something, then you can do comparative analysis and you can compare other situations and say this too is also forbidden, or this too is also permitted, or in this case it would be different because you understand the reason. So the Mishnah, even though we said before the reasons of the Mishnahs are clear, that's because the Talmud explains the reasons of the Mishnah. The Mishnah comes to give you the what of God's will. What does he want? Clarify the will. The Talmud comes to give you the why. Now, you would think, where is there more light? Where is there more when you know the why? So in a sense, the Talmud is a much more revealed book. The Mishnah is a concealed book, and the Talmud is a revealed book. It's to give you the why. But he says, no. The why in Torah, we're just nibbling on the most external element of the why. The real why is so elusive because the real why is unknown to us until the days of Mashiach. We have no clue of the why of Torah. So when the Talmud makes an attempt at the why, and the Talmud does get a why, a reasoning for things, it's hardly a reason. And therefore, it's not that it's not true. In that reason that the Talmud is going lies hidden in it an infinite reasoning, an infinite boundless reasoning, but it's not revealed to the reader of the Talmud. It's still closed. The reason is there, but the reason is still locked. It's like in the Talmud, let me put it this way. It's in the Talmud, you're downloading files, true files, but they're all locked. And we can't unlock it. The Mishnah, whatever you're learning, is unlocked. Because the Mishnah gives you, because in the Mishnah, you're not concerned with the why. The Mishnah, you're concerned with the what. The what of God's will is very clear. He says that's muktzah on Shabbos, and that's not muktzah. This is kosher, and this is not. The what we know. The why we don't know. Since the Talmud is going into the why, so therefore the reasons the Talmud gives remains elusive. We're getting reasoning, which we think, therefore, we understand, but we really recognize that we really don't know the real reasons of the things. So the Talmud is a form of communication with God that we can sense the mystery more than what is revealed. But in the Mishnah, you're getting, God is open. Put it this way, God is opening up to us in the Mishnah. In the Talmud, he is still remaining closed. Although the Talmud is much more elaborate than the Mishnah. But the Talmud is attempting to touch deeper where the Mishnah is going, and you can't go there. That level of God's self, he didn't open to us. So they're touching it, they're nibbling on it, but it remains concealed. So it's like a potential girl who can marry the king. She can be a vessel, so to speak, for the king's energy, but he has not yet revealed himself in her. And therefore, that's why the Talmud is called the young girls who are potential. And one day when Mashiach comes, God will be married to all the laws of the Talmud, to all the we will see the infinite light in every one of those teachings of we will study Talmud and we will be blown away by the godly light that's in it. It will finally it will unlock. And then all these women will be married women. The entire Talmud would be married women. But until Mashiach comes, they're all potential the teachings are all potential suitors for the king, potential matches. He's kind of already laid his eye on them, so to speak, but he hasn't consummated, so to speak, his relationship with them. So in the laws, he's still. Let's see inside. The Inyan ki Talmud ikre lahavin atamim. The main idea of the Talmud is to understand the reasons. V'hatamim, and the reasons, and be'emes b'pchinas helam. And the reasons is really hidden. She'en yochaylam la'amoid, because we're not able to stand al shorshay shalatam, on the root of the reason, the ikra, and its primary essence. Because that's not able to reveal itself. As long as the world is not yet in its full godly potential, which is going to happen only in Mashiach state, until we're not yet in that state, the reasoning behind all the laws of Torah cannot be revealed to us. Rak la'asid, only in the future, is galu tamei Torah. The reasoning of Torah is going to be revealed. The real reason of the mitzvahs. The pleasure that God gets of it, the understanding of it on the deepest, godliest level is going to be revealed then. That's part of Mashiach's Torah. And even though the Gemara, the Talmud, does give us the reason, nevertheless, if you really, in other words, when you're learning Talmud, so if you're learning it superficially, you get the reason. But if you really, really, really start probing really deep, you remain with more questions than answers. So there's different ways of learning. When you start learning and you're completely on the outside, you have a lot of questions. Then when you get in the inside and you understand it, then you don't have questions, you understand it. But then if you learn it over again, and you really, really, really start learning really well, you get to a lot of questions. And then and actually, these questions come from really understanding. And then you really have like, so so when you're learning very deep, loy bo hatam ba'asaga, then you realize that the reason is not grasped. Dugma, he gives an example. He's going to give an example from a mitzvah of tzitzis. The mitzvah of the fringes that we wear at the end of our clothing, the four corners. So we say like this. The Torah says you should see the tzitzis. By seeing the tzitzis, these are the tzitzis, the fringes, by looking at them, you'll remember the commandments. For whatever reason, when you look at the tzitzis, you're supposed to remember the divine commandments. So the Talmud deduces that pajamas don't have to have tzitzis. If you have a four-cornered pajama, you don't have to put on tzitzis because it's meant for the night. And since the nighttime is dark, it's not a time of seeing. So garments, which are night garments, which are meant to be worn at night, are exempt from tzitzis. You don't have to put the fringes on. Because really the law of tzitzis is every four-corner garment must have tzitzis. But only one that you will wear during the day. One that is designated for nighttime, you don't have to wear the tzitzis. You don't have to have the fringes on it. Fine. Since it says you should see it, and since by night is not a time of vision, that's why it's exempt from tzitzis. However, uksus suma, how about a blind person who cannot see? Is a blind man who has in his wardrobe garments with four corners, does he need to have tzitzis on his garment? He can't see. It says you should wear the tzitzis so you should see it. The blind man can't see at all. So is a blind man obligated if he buys a four-corner bar or he makes for himself a four-cornered garment, does he have to wear tzitzis on? So the Talmud says, no, yeah, a blind man is chayav b'tzitzis. Why? Even though he can't see, but others can see him. And since he's wearing it during the day when others can see, if it's a day garment, a blind man's day garment has to have tzitzis because others can see. since others can see it. That's the reasoning of the Talmud. A nighttime garment, no, because in the nighttime you can't see. But a daytime garment for a blind man, yeah. And most people who study this teaching in Talmud are satisfied and they go to sleep. They're done. They learned beautiful law. Makes sense. Blind man, other people can see his garment. But a nighttime garment, pajamas, it's worn during night. No one sees it. It doesn't need tzitzis. So the Alter Rebbe says, okay, but if you think about it a little deeper, it should be totally opposite. If you think about it, since the whole mitzvah is to remember, by seeing you remember, the blind man never gets to remember by seeing, he never sees. So the blind man shouldn't have to wear tzitzis. What do you care? Other people see it. It says you should see your tzitzis and you'll remember. The mitzvah of tzitzis is for the person wearing it, to serve as a reminder. He can't see. He should not have to wear tzitzis. Pajamas, it's at night. But by day, you'll look at your pajamas. If you'll see your pajamas during the day, you should have tzitzis. So why are you exempting the pajamas, but you're not exempting the blind man? If you think deeply, and it doesn't make any sense. But we know it's the truth. And we know that one day, and when God will reveal, when we'll appreciate tzitzis the way it really is, we'll realize that for sure a blind man doesn't, but the reason of it, we don't know. So the Talmud gives us kind of, when all the reasoning the Talmud gives us, sometimes are brilliant, are really just what? Like a lot of times you give someone a reason for something and you're just, what's it called? You don't want them. Yeah, you're placating. You're placating I'm giving you a reason. but you know it's not. It's the real reason you're not telling them. So all the reasons we're getting in the Talmud are considered superficial reasoning. It's not the real reasons. I'm not saying it's not the real reason. It is the real reason. But we're not seeing the infinite depth of these reasons. What we're able to crack today and see in it is only superficial element of the reasoning. If we would just use reason and logic, according to our understanding, it should have made more sense to obligate pajamas with tzitzis, because the person is a person who can see, even though it's technically a garment during the nighttime that you don't see. Especially at night, you can't see. But what happens if you turn on a lamp? What do you mean? The Torah knows that at night, what have people been using since in all of history? We've always had candles. We've always had lanterns. Forget about modern days when nighttime, we all have lights on. How many hours do we spend at night seeing because we have means to see? No, pajamas don't need tzitzis. Why? Because nighttime is not a time. Mashenkin Suma, the blind man, ain't a raya klal. He can't see at all. As many lights in the world, he can't see. Because others can see. Based on God's infinite wisdom. Neschayev ksus, a garment is obligated. When others can see it, it's obligated. Even if the wearer, the owner of the garment doesn't see at all. This that we accept this reasoning. This that you can see it by others more than the fact that pajamas you can see at night. We value the vision that others can see the blind man's clothing during the day is a more serious type of vision than we can nighttime vision that we see through lamps. We consider that stronger. Loy bla klal behis galus lamayla. This reason has not revealed itself to us. Why this is primary and that not. So the Talmud is kind of getting away with placating us with a reason which isn't really satisfying. That's what he's saying. And the reason is because what are you trying to understand? It's not human law. This is God's law. These are God's commandments. What do you think you understand it? The Talmud is very daring that it is peeking into where it shouldn't be peeking. God wants us to peek into that. So we're getting a vague idea, but we don't get clarity. And the idea that we're not getting clarity means that we're not really understanding God in it. So if we're not really understanding God, it means that God is not communicating himself fully to us in the Talmud, like he is doing in the Mishnah, although we're not knowing his reasoning, but we know what makes him happy and what makes him upset. You might not have to know the reason of why this makes your wife happy and why this makes her upset, but it's good enough to know that this makes her happy and that makes her upset. And that's it. And that means knowing her on some level. Even though we can study the Talmud very, very deeply, once we accept the concept that pajamas don't need tzitzis, and we're kind of buying into the story that the Talmud is selling us, because it says you have to see it, and by night is not, and we accepted that. Now you can go into deep Talmudic discussions. What's considered nighttime garment? What's not considered a nighttime garment? But you're basing it on a principle that's very illogical. In other words, the basis of it that we accept. In other words, what he's basically saying is that a lot of the Talmud study is starting off with accepting certain principles, although they don't make sense. After you accept the basic principle, then you can go in with deep logic within that itself. That's okay. But the fundamental principle is not logical. Doesn't mean there's no logic. The logic is not revealed to us. The essence of the root of the reason, the ksuslaila potter, that a garment of night is exempt, that is hidden from us. Because the reason that the Talmud is giving us is a very general reason. But the specifics of it and is not midachsev, you should see it, prat. Avaloi is galus, but it hasn't really revealed itself. Kol pirate in yonei atam, the real richness and the texture of that reason to its fullest, the deeper dimensions of the reasons have not opened up to us. Ba'amkus, in a deep way. Why is a blind man's garment not excluded? Because it's so divine, the world can't handle the reason. That's what he's saying. The fact that you don't understand something doesn't make it silly. It makes it beyond you. If you have a little humility, if you don't have humility, you think that anything you don't understand is stupid because you don't understand it, because you're the barometer of wisdom. But when you have a little humility and you understand how puny and tiny and insignificant our brains are, even if we are a scholar of Harvard, now Harvard means nothing, but let's say when Harvard meant something, okay, even if you are a genius, but you realize that you're dealing with the infinite mind of who the entire universe to him is a big nothing, as we discussed earlier, and he's sharing with us his brilliant reasoning, and with the fact that it baffles and we don't get it, it doesn't mean that it's silly. It means that it's beyond us. It's so when we learn and we don't understand the reason, it should only awe us. We should only become more awed by the enormity and the awesomeness, and get so excited if we can even get a little squeeze of lemon over there, if we can get a little something. Like it says in Psalms, your thoughts are so deep. How deep are God's thoughts? And even though the Talmud does nibble, we said earlier, the Talmud does give us some of the nibbling on the reasoning. Till we could explain the reason of a Mishnah. How can we say it's so deep? If it's so deep, How is it that God's thoughts, which are his Torah, so deep, it should be it should be completely closed? The entire reasoning of Torah should be completely a closed book, and we should have no access at all to any reasoning in Torah. Why is it that Torah does come to us at least with a drip, drip, drip? We're getting little drips of reasons. But the truth is in the contrary. The fact that the Torah does drip down to us is indicating that it's coming from an infinite place. And because of, let's put it this way. The reason we're understanding some of it, we're getting a little bit of it. Again, most of it is elusive. But the fact that a little bit does come down into our grasp of understanding, it's not because it's graspable. It's not because it's a lower quality wisdom that's kind of closer to the human mind so we can nibble at it. No. There are much, much, much infinitely lower philosophies out there in the universe that are way beyond human comprehension, and we don't understand any of it. Let's put it this way. The Torah is up here. Our brains are down here. Anything a little bit higher than the human frequency between us and the Torah, we have zero understanding it. So if we can't, if the level of wisdom that's up here, angelic wisdom, is outside of our understanding, and here there's higher angels and higher, and it's our understanding, God's wisdom. So the reason some of the Torah does come down is not because it's not because it's a lower wisdom we can understand it. No. It's because it's such an infinite wisdom and it's so boundless that it has no limitations. And because it has no limitations, it can trickle down even to the lowest. For example, this is a concept we say, there are certain wise people, because they're so wise, they can't communicate with simple people. They definitely can't communicate with fools. They have no way to communicate with fools because they're so wise, and the fool is so foolish. So they have no communication. There's no language. King Solomon was able to hang out with all the Mishagayim in town. All the actual imbeciles that were living in King Solomon's town, King Solomon can come in the street corner with the biggest fools and communicate with them and share wisdom with them. Why? Not because, we understand they're imbeciles. They're fools. They're literally boneheads. How can a king Solomon? But because he had such infinite wisdom, the more expansive your mind is, the lower you can come. So the fact that some of the Torah comes down to us, as I mentioned earlier, there are much lesser, infinitely lesser wisdoms and disciplines and sciences that are beyond us, and we can't even nibble on them. Torah we could nibble on, not because we have a relationship with it, but because it's so infinite, so it can go everywhere. It can come even here. But when it comes over here, only a tiny little. It shouldn't be a wonder to us that we don't get the whole thing. When King Solomon was able to communicate with a fool, it means that he was able to share something with the fool. The fool didn't get King Solomon's infinite mind, is incredible brilliance. He got something. Others were not able to. King Solomon was able to bring them. So the fact that some Torah, some reasoning of God is revealed in the Talmud, which let's say is the realm of the fools, meaning the human thinking, the human mind, that is testimony to the infinite brilliance of the Torah, that it can come down to human minds. Now, currently, until Mashiach comes, little tiny nuggets of it, little droplets. When Mashiach comes, we're going to start seeing the infinite depth of every law of Torah when it's going to be revealed to us. But for the reason that we just explained, Talmud is considered a closed book, meaning to say the reasons in it, the godly is not really that much revealed in it. And that's why it's like the girls that have not had the union with the king. So again, comes from a higher place. Therefore, even when it comes down, it can't reveal the depth of its understanding. L'chein nikra hamemris alamois. That's why it's called virgins. Lashon alma means a virgin. Psula, a girl. Ve'ishla yada, and a man does not know her. Shaloi kibla adayin. She hasn't received yet tipas techar. She haven't received yet the seminal drop, which means there hasn't been a transmission. Shaloi ba is galos atam. What the Talmud wants to convey, what it's meant to convey, it's not conveying. It is conveying. It's a vessel for it. It's a very external outline of something, but the real depth of it is not. It's not coming through. So it's like a girl who's ready to marry the king, but she hasn't yet had a union with him. And its depth has not been delivered yet down here below. Rak nisher behelem, it remained concealed. But here the Alter Rebbe is going to say something mind-blowing. The Talmud itself is not static, which means it's not frozen where it was when the sages revealed it back then. What does that mean? Any scholar, especially a tzaddik, a great scholar, is able to pull out the real reasoning that's in the Talmud and pump it down and reveal it. By doing that, what he's doing is he's making a mazel tov. He's making the king now be one with that woman. He's bringing the yichud. In other words, the Talmud itself has all these potential girls, and that's why the reasons are very vague and hardly revealed. But that Alter Rebbe says, when you're studying halacha, and you really probe deep, and you get suddenly such a brilliant clarity, you've changed the cosmic relationship between that halacha, that teaching. You added light in there that till now was hovering and was not unified. You brought that union of the masculine and the feminine together. The person did it. So it could be a rabbi living 2,000 years after the Talmud was closed, and he achieves something you're sticking to the laws of the Talmud because they're the truth, but you're revealing the depth of the reason that was not revealed until now. In general, we say the depth of the reasons are only going to be revealed when Mashiach comes, but we can do them with individual laws. When you learn Torah very, very, very strongly, and you concentrate, and you make it your life, and there are rabbis later who reveal, like you find sometimes, there's teachings of the sages, they're like, okay, what do they mean? And then the Rebbe comes, and he gives this brilliant sikha, and you say, wow, so that's the depth of what was been said. And it's almost like no one ever saw in this teaching of the sage what the Rebbe saw. It's like when the Rebbe learns a Rambam and he reveals to you a depth that you wonder if the Rambam himself had that depth when he was learning the Rambam. Or like the Rebbe revealed in the Rashi, like such brilliant ideas. You think, did Rashi really think that when Rashi wrote it? I have that feeling a lot of times. Maybe he did, maybe didn't. But even if he didn't, his words are divine words. The outside construct is divine. So it contains a depth. It doesn't necessarily mean that the full depth of it was revealed even to the author of it. And later, at any time, each and every one of us could reveal in the teachings of what was once said, we can pull out the true divine reasoning in them. And that's given to every soul, the ability to do that. With this, we'll understand the incredible quality of those who study halacha. Be'iyun, and learn Torah. Be'iyun means with deep concentration. Va'omek, and depth. Hadas. V'al yedei zeh moitzi din chadash. And as a result of that, we create a new halacha, a new din that no one thought of. Oisha oimed al tam. Either you come up with a new din, or you come up with the reason you get a certain clarity in a law that till now, everybody that spoke about the law, you feel they didn't give the clarity, and suddenly one rabbi has such a clarity in this law. Or you reveal the reason of a certain halacha. Shahaya nelam tchila, which was hidden till now. Hinezehu b'chinas halibun. So it's very amazing. The Talmud refers to it, to this idea of clarifying halacha. The Talmud refers to it as libun hilchasa, whitening the laws. That's how they call it, whitening the laws. Because the idea of whitening means when the laws are unclear, they're considered dark. And when you're clarifying it, it's called whitening it, because you're making it white, you're making it clear. But according to a deeper reason, now we'll understand spiritually, you're bringing the Or Ein Sof down into the halach. And the Or Ein Sof is called the supernal whiteness. You're bringing God down into it. You're revealing, you're channeling. So the same godliness that's in the Mishnah is now revealed in this particular halacha. And the person was the one, any one of us has the ability to do that if we choose to study Torah. But this takes a lot of exertion, a lot of hard work. And he says, but those who have the merit to do that, in Ebchinas Halibun, what does it mean to whiten? That which was once in a state of concealment, the Elam Gomer, and again, the word alamais, which comes from the word which means a virgin, also means, why is she a virgin? Because her husband is concealed from her. He has not been intimate with her. The Elam Gomer, so it was a concealment. Now nimshach b'pchinas giloy. Now it's drawn in a revealed way. And this is what brings to revelation the infinite. The supernal whiteness. The whiteness represents the simple infinity of God. Before there is any coloring, the infinite light in its purity. And when you reveal the infinite light in the purity, when you get the depth of the reasoning and it's shining, you can understand it. It's shining means that godly light is shining in what was already a preformed channel, but until now there was no illumination in it. And every single person who studies halacha and learns it really well until they come up with a reasoning, that a clarity, sometimes that no other rabbi had before, that's now revealing the godly light in that particular halach. The option is bar, and even though we seem to have said before that the depth of the reason in the Talmud is closed, we can't understand it. And now we're saying that we're able to? What does that mean? We were saying earlier that the Talmud's laws remain a mystery. And now we're saying that that a student who studies hard and could understand. Could you or you can't? That's the question. The option is the depth of the reason of the halachis. You're not able to. We're not able to come to its depth. He says that's true, but that's the main root of the halacha. The reason of why, like the reasons that the Talmud does give us, we can come to a sharpening of it, and a sharpening of it, and a sharpening of it, and a clarification of it. In other words, we sometimes don't understand not sometimes. We will never, until Mashiach comes, be able to understand the infinite depth of the reason. But what we could understand is when we see certain things in Talmud or laws that seem to contradict each other. And that creates so why when it comes to this, we say so. When it comes to this, we say so. Most people say, I don't know, but that's just the way it is. But someone who's really, really gonna pay attention is going to work hard and do a comparative analysis and think deeper and deeper until he or she will come to an understanding why in this case the sages saw it like this, and why in this case the sages saw it like this, and why it makes sense it should be like this over here, and why it makes sense. So When you take the reasons that there are and you sharpen them and crystallize them, that we're able to do. And when we do that, we are causing the light to come flowing through these different laws. And the Ein Sof is now coming down, not just through the broad channels of the Mishnah, but through the details. Now, but you might say, why do I need that? If I can meet God in the Mishnah, why do I have to meet God in the Talmud? And the answer is very simple. When you're reading God, when you're meeting God in the Mishnah, you're meeting God in a very general way. It's like getting to know someone on a very, very, very general way. So I get to know you, but I get to know only your general principles. But then, if you really want to get to know the person, you want to be able to know the nuances. That's what it means to really get to know someone. To get to know not just, you're feeling happy, you're feeling sad. Okay. Explain to me what kind of happiness, what's bothering, it's the nuances. In the Talmud, you're getting the nuances. And when you get to know the nuances, you're getting deeper in God. So the Mishnah is communicating God to us. But in the Talmud, because you're going into the nuances, it is so hard, it's so lofty, but when you do get it, you're getting much closer. So it's got that. So this is called whitening the laws. Nimtza comes out. Also, when you're learning Torah, not just the Mishnah, but you're learning the statements of the Talmud. Shehem Gemara, which is the Gemara. Upaiskim. Paiskim are the halacha codifiers after the Talmud, like the Rif, the Alfasi, Rambam, and then later the Tur and the Bet Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. These are Paiskim. Rishonim, the early generations, the early masters, Va'acharonim, and the latter, from the latter generations, to really probe until you come to the depth of what they're saying and why they're saying it. Nimshach Gamken, you're also bringing down Gili Orein Sof Baruch Hu. You're causing the light to reveal itself in these channels, in these pathways. And what are you doing? You're causing God's unity with the world. That God should unify with the Shekhinah, not just in general, but with all the crevices of the Shekhinah, all the details of time and space. Because all the laws, what are the laws? What's the difference between the Mishnah? The Mishnah gives you a general principle. It doesn't get into the nook and cranny of the details of time and space. It's very, very general. But you want to bring God down into every detail and sub-detail and sub-detail. Halacha takes every tiny possibility of life and illuminates the godly into it. And so that God fills the narrowest, tiniest alleyways. That's the point. And that's the purpose of creation. And the person is causing that flow to happen. The Torah is the map through which God's light flows to every detail, every little village and every small little or Verfenishtettel, if you call it. Canal be'inyan masnis and malkasa. The Adarabba, and on the contrary, liban hilchasahu maili yasera. Whitening the laws is even a greater quality. Shemegala hanelam. You're revealing something deeper. Remember, we said earlier, where's the main depth of a person? Not in the general. The real depth of a person is in the nuances of the human being. You know, if I get to know about you that you like chocolate ice cream, not vanilla, and then I know that you like you like sports more than you like I don't know what politics. Okay, so what do I know? It's easy to know people that way. That's the way, someone who sits with you in the same davens in the same shul knows that, a congregant. But someone who spends day and night with you and so on, then they know the nuances, they know the details. So that's what you get up and close with the Talmud. You get to know the hidden elements of God's character, if you might say. Shemizgala hanelam, you're revealing the hidden, the taluma is chachma, the more concealed elements of God's wisdom. When a person is studying in this fashion, now here is where the mimer goes back to the spiritual. We're ending with the learning now, okay? So now we're going to go fire again. This, when a person studies Torah, so remember, we brought you should remember this. It says in Shir Hashirim, in the song, in the Song of Songs, the girl, it's the whole Shir Hashirim, the whole Song of Songs. King Solomon is speaking like a love song. So the woman is saying, I hear the sounds of my beloved. I hear him coming. Kol doidi hune hine zeba, the sound of my beloved, he's coming closer. I hear his voice. So we asked the question, and it said it's referring to the giving of the Torah when we heard God's voice coming. But then we asked the question, if you remember, 3 weeks ago, why does it say it in the current? It should say, Koil doidi, behold the voice of my beloved. He came. He came already. We heard him back at Sinai 3,500 years ago. We heard God's voice. Why does it say, Hine zebo, behold, he is coming? Implying that it's happening now. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, if you're learning Torah and you're interested to hear God's voice, you're not learning Torah because you want to be a smart aleck. You're not even learning Torah because you want to know the law. You want to know God. So when every time you're learning, you're turning on the channel. You're dialing in, you're tuning on, you're opening up the radio to the frequency of God's station. That's what's happening. You're literally tuning in your television or your radio to the divine station. And now God is descending into your Torah study that you're learning. God is talking. It's not you talking. It's the same voice that has been speaking at Sinai is now speaking. The ultimate truth of God is now channeling. Through the study of Torah, it is currently happening. Koil doidi, the voice of my beloved, who is Galus Oirein Soif, the revelation of the Ein Sof, Gam Atom Mamish. Literally now it's happening. V'zeu hine zeba. This is what it means. It's happening now. Hine kloshen hoiva, right now. Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu koide v'shayne kenegdoi. Because as we said earlier, when a person studies, God is learning along with you at the very moment that you're learning. And this voice of God is leaping over the mountains. So what is it called leaping? We say the voice of my beloved, he is coming. He's leaping over mountains. Now we'll understand why. Because if you remember in the beginning of the class today, we said that the creations are all created and they're nothing. The entire universe and the entire creation is nothing. God is infinitely above the creation. So there is an infinite gap. There's an infinite gap between creation and God. For God to enter into the universe, he has to leap over an absolute gap. He is introducing absolute existence into this nothing. So he's leaping over a really unbridgeable gap. Really, it should not be able to be bridged. Nothingness with absolute something cannot have no connection. But the channel, that's the channel of Torah. The channel of Torah is to do the impossible. To communicate into the world the real reality that is infinitely above the world. So when we're learning Torah, we're causing an infinite leap. This descent from God's essential wisdom into the world cannot come in an evolution. God is taking a leap. We can't leap that leap. God can make that leap. He is making that leap from his world into our world. Like we explained earlier at great length on the verse. Your wonders and your thoughts. To us, there's no comparison. So much so that we say that in order for God, yes, to give us a crumb of his light, it has to go through infinite contractions. There is no comparison at all. There is no comparison at all from a cause to an effect. how the distance there is between a cause and an effect. There is an infinite chasm, as we discussed. Even if the evolution would be with an infinite chain, Revavos ein Shir, we will never get from God to the world. Remember, we learned that the lowest link of the chain to the highest link of a chain have a connection. But between us, between the worlds and God, there is no connection. It is a absolute separation. It's not possible even to bridge that gap. So for the Ein Sof to enclose himself in the Torah, and for God to learn along with us, that God should be mentioning his name through our vocal cords, that his channel should tune into our channel, and that our channel should converge, is an impossibility. That's taking a divine leap. God is leaping over the infinite gap. This revelation comes through a leap and a jump. It's not through a progressive evolution of a cause and an effect, because it would never, if God would decide that he wants to come down and he say, I want to do it stage by stage, even infinite stages would never get him down here. He has to leap over, which means not come through a gradual. He does the impossible. He transmits himself from his realm into our realm, but the beautiful thing is, without reducing himself. As he is, he compresses his very self and introduces it into us. However, and here comes, and now in chapter 5 is where the Alter Rebbe is going to conclude the discourse with a powerful piece. Where is he going with this? I think we have to do some push-ups before we continue. But what does he conclude the discourse with? I'm saying concluding because I just want to ensnare you to stay a little longer. I know that, but this is the schmaltz of the discourse. What is he saying? The Alter Rebbe is going to say, you can learn Torah and you can channel Shnanel, but the only way you can channel it is if your soul is on fire. Is before you learn, you have to be already in a state that you want God. You have to be in a state that you're yearning and pining for him. That you feel so frustrated, trapped in this nothingness of the finite world. And you realize it's utter nothingness. The finite world is not exciting us. When we realize how foolish and temporal and nothing it is, no matter even if we own the entire world, even if we were to gain everything, win the biggest lottery ever, and buy out everything, and live a life of everything, we realize that we've just accumulated a whole bunch of nothing. And therefore we realize how ridiculous it is. And we don't want that. We want only him. When we want only him, then when we learn, he channels into us. So that's why the verse says like this. There are 60 queens. These are the 60 tractates. There are 80 concubines. And again, the number 80, he didn't explain in the discourse. Why the 80? But there are 80 concubines, which is a lesser communication. And there are women without an end. I mean, you can indulge yourself in Torah and God flows in the Torah. But God concludes and he says, but one is my dove. What I am seeking is the oneness of your heart, that you're seeking the oneness. You're exposing to me your essence of your soul in other words, we have it. Here's the thing. How do we even know the infinite reality? If there is a quantum separation between us and it, if there is an infinite gap between us and the absoluteness of God, how do we even know about it? Why would we even yearn for it? From what place would we even yearn for it if there's this infinite, boundless, and unbridgeable gap? How is it even? Again, we're talking about a something that's outside of all the sublime worlds. None of them are capturing it. How do we even know about it? The answer is Gewalt. Their answer is Gewalt. Guys, listen here. We do have a chip. Planted inside of us, we have a chip of absolute reality. A tiny little chip is planted. Like they planted this week, the Neuralink, the first Neuralink they planted in someone's brain. God planted a chip of himself inside of us. That chip is the essence of our soul. And that's the reason why you can't sell a Jew this world. We never buy it. When I say you can't sell, of course, Jews, we can get very, very much excited about this world. But a Jew is never satisfied. A Gentile can be satisfied. He can have a piece of this world and he's happy. He has his four-wheel drive truck, red truck with big tires. He has a dog, big dog that comes out, jumps out after him. He goes in, he buys a six-pack at the thing. Got his tattoos on his. No, I'm saying, and I go. Something's going to a store. He watches the Super Bowl next week, and he's really deeply satisfied and happy. That's missing. Nobody makes a living, doing well. He can buy, have himself a good. He has a long driveway, a nice estate. He's really happy. Jews are not that way. He's always busy. No matter what he has, he's unhappy. He's looking. There is this. It's crazy. This restlessness. There's always a. So what do you have? What the Jews? There's always something up the sleeve. We're cuckoo people. We are really insane. But the reason for it, let's understand for the madness, and that's why the world doesn't get us and we don't get ourselves. The reason is because inside the Jew's soul is a chip of what's outside the universe. Of what's outside the universe. A chip of God himself is inside the Jew's soul. And that's why we can never, ever just enjoy the world. We always think we want a bigger piece of the world. But it's not, that's not really what we're seeking. Subconsciously, we want him. We want him. So that's subconscious. God says, open up the window to that part of your soul. Communicate with it. Understand what it wants. Hear its cry. And allow that cry into your consciousness in prayer. Prayer is when we're supposed to come to that understanding that we don't want anything. Because everything that there is just one big nothing. We don't want it. I want you. When we want him, then what does he do? He gives us himself. When we study Torah. But if we just study Torah without this introduction of wanting him, you're not interested, you're not seeking him, he's not channeling. The Torah has to be after the prayer. And that's what God says. One is my dove. The dove are the two birds, lovebirds, where one looks out. Doves sit, and one can sit on one tree, one can sit on the other, and they can sit and gaze at each other. God says, I love when you gaze at me. And all you want is just your intimacy with me, and you're melting. You want to just dissolve in that. And then I come to you. Where do I come to you? Through the Mishnah, through the Talmud, through the learning. First, you have to want me. That's the next piece. The ratzo has to be there. It's called ratzoi v'shuv. The shuv is the Torah that we study out, but first there has to be the yearning. So let's read it inside. However, there is one thing that rises above everything, and that is, when does this revelation come? Al Yedei Esek Torah, through the study of Torah. When will we hear our voice of our beloved? So when the bride is waiting, when she's on the mountain looking out, when is he coming? Then he will come. So when will the voice of the man, the voice of the beloved, come? When will HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when will the transcendental, infinite, true being come unify himself with his wife, with his Shekhinah, with his Al Yedei Esek Torah? When we study Torah, that's when it happens. But what's going to trigger it? Shem Samis Mesechtes, which are the 60 tractates. Hanekram Samach Malochos, which are called the 60 queens. Kol Zehu Dafka Bahagdim Tchila. All of this only happens Bahagdim Tchila, when we first preface Achasi Anasi. We first show God that we're a dove of oneness. There should be by a person the level that's called achas. Like we say, achas sha'alti, one thing. Achat sha'alti, one thing I'm asking. I don't want anything else. King David, achas. What is achas? There are 5 levels of the soul. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, yechida. The yechida is called achas. You know why she's called achas? Yechida is the deepest part of the soul that wants nothing other than oneness with God. Achas is feminine of echad. So God is called echad. He's the masculine one. Achas is our space within us to receive him. It's the openness in our soul that matches. It's the counter. It's the receptiveness of God's oneness. Now, to receive God's oneness, you have to be in a state that you have no desire but it. There's nothing else on your mind. If there's still multiplicity, if there's still self-desires for anything else, then you're not wanting God. Wanting God means the exclusive oneness of just him. Yeah, there has to be a cancellation of every other desire. There's only one desire. And we all have it. We have a space in us where we only want one thing, but it's covered by a bunch of other desires. So our work during prayer is to shovel all the other desires and reject them, because we think a little deeper. We realize, what is that going to give me? I don't want that. What do I really want? To dig it out. You have to dig. We're digging until we discover the deepest essence of our own soul that wants nothing other than the unity with God. Then we've exposed our achas, and into our achas, into the feminine oneness, will come the masculine one. Will come God himself. And what's this achas? Pidish achas, hu lashon nukva. Achas is one in the feminine, in the female term. It's the feminine recipiency that receives the echad, receives the one. When a person receives in his innermost, God's oneness. When we say Shema Yisrael, Havaya Echad, we say, Hear, O Israel, God is one. What does that mean? There's only one reality. There's only one truth. There's only one being. There's only one thing that truly exists. And I'm receiving that oneness. What does that mean? If I'm receiving that oneness, it means every other desire is canceled. Every other nuance in my soul is canceled because he's only one. It's only him. Kishma, and here's the thing, and that's why we're saying, it's interesting, the word we use to introduce echad, to receive the oneness, we say Shema. Shema means simply what? To hear. The deeper meaning of Shema means to gather. Gathering together. So what does that mean? So gathering means take it in. Shema, Hear, O Israel means, just like when you're hearing, what does hearing mean? So, first of all, just the mere fact of hearing, seeing something doesn't mean it's going in, because you're seeing what's there. Hearing, a sound goes into you. But there's different ways of hearing. You can hear, and it went in. But as we know, a lot of times, especially with husbands, it's always that way. When women talk to their husbands, it goes in one ear, it goes out the other. Right? Men, they just don't get it. Their wives tell them things and they don't remember. I know. So when you say to hear means, do you hear me? Means, is it going in? Is it going in and is it sticking? You want it to stick, to stay there so you don't forget. And it's there. I don't have to tell you a million times the same thing. Let it go in. So when we're saying Shema Yisrael, hear Israel, you're talking to yourself. You're saying, listen, you're Jewish. So since you're Jewish, you are a vessel for this. You can take this in. So Shema, hear, absorb, and let it go in. Let it go into the depth of your being. Let it hit you at your very core. That God is one. And as a result of that, V'ahavta, vacuum all your loves. Take a suction. We have a lot of, see what happens in our heart is our heart has a whole bunch of loves. I like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. We have a whole bunch of loves. Our love is squandered into so many different things. It's like in a relationship. A husband and a wife. Sometimes if a person has so many hobbies and so many things, they don't have much space so much love left to love their wife or to love their husband, because they're so squandered with all the million things that they love. And if they're giving time for this and giving time for this and giving that, they don't have time for their relationship. So part of a good relationship is to clear space. There's no other things. It's only you. It's only me. So it creates the bond that there's nothing else. It's not squandered. But with God, it's much deeper than that. There can't be any other love. You have to, that's the meaning of, once you hear the oneness, then v'ahavta, as Hashem Elokecha, take all your love and direct it towards one thing, and that is God. I want God's light, God's truth to be inside of me. I want his reality to become my reality. So Piddish, so Shema Uloshen Asifa, b'toich toich, I take it in. It's not just some intellectual knowledge. I think very deeply, with deep contemplation, and think about it so long until you can visualize it, until you can actually see the oneness of God, that he is and there's none but him. The Loshen Listakala, what does it mean to gaze? And gazing over here means it's like when you're seeing something that is just absolutely marvelous. You ever looked at something that is stunning? Stunningly beautiful, stunningly magnificent, exquisite. It takes your breath away. And so much so that you can get transfixed by looking at something and forget the passage of time. You're standing here ready for 3 hours and you didn't even know that the time passed. Just looking. Your eye is almost like cannot get satiated. You just always want to come back and look again. Or you want to continue looking. You can't pull the person away because he just wants to look at it. It's such an amazing, it's called, usually when you see something, okay, I looked at it enough. It reminds me that my wife, we were in Venice in the summer. And so we went to this palace there of the magistrate. They had like the ruling, they have in Venice, they have this big And I like to read. I go into a place that looks like that. It's like 800 years ago, what the palaces look like. Things gold and statues and not statues, but the paintings. And my wife had no patience. And I'm saying, I tell you, we're here already. Let me just stand. I remember I was feeling pain because I just wanted to be in the room. And we're gonna. I saw already. Let's go. I know that. So you see that there's sometimes that your eye has not yet seen. You haven't yet enjoyed it to enough, and you want to see it longer. So that's what he says means. It says you should gaze at the glory of the King. Is that you imagine someone that you start davening and you're gazing at the godly, at the divine with the eye of your mind. And you get stuck in davening and you don't realize the passage of time. Think about this is the way the old Hasidim would daven. They had no sense of time when they davened. 2 hours, 3 hours went by, and they're still holding it. Middle Baruch She'amar. They suddenly saw it. They saw that God is speaking and the world is coming into being. We daven with minyan, so we're always moving. The Hasidim, then they couldn't daven with minyan. They started with the minyan, but they ended up got lost somewhere. So Shabbos, the Kiddush would happen, the Farbrengen was going on, and the Chassid was standing in the corner. He has no idea that the cholent is finished and that all the food is gone. And he's standing in the corner and he's lost in the exquisiteness of the prayer. He finished davening 4:00 in the afternoon. And it wasn't like, oh, he worked hard. It was like he was in a trance. And he was in the most beautiful place ever to gaze at the glory of God. As he says, someone looks at something wondrous. By the eye can't be satiated. More than this. So and more than this, without an end. When the one who is wise will contemplate with the eye of the intellect, in his greatness, the greatness of the Creator, that is infinite, and in his incredible wonders, and that God created supernal worlds without an end. Literally worlds without an end. And especially when you start breaking it down, how each world, each universe is parallel universes. And each universe compared to the one above it is considered nothing. That's how magnificent they get, higher and higher. The lowest level of the lowest point of the higher level includes all the worlds that are beneath it, and it itself is way above it, which is nothing compared to what's higher. And in this, there are worlds without an end. Higher and higher. And that's the worlds themselves. And then you realize that what? That all the worlds wrapped together, this entire endless chain of worlds, they are all nothing in front of God. Nothing to him. There's no value at all. That he is the master of wonders. And then the eye, if you can visualize this, the eye will never be satiated. You can stand like this for 1 billion years and still continue looking. Thinking about it, something that is valuable enough to look at for 1 billion years and not want to move away. It's only God. But 1 billion is a very silly number when it comes to God. For all of eternity, you can stand and look at him and be blown away by his endlessness. So the eye will the eye of the mind will never get satiated We'll never feel enough. And to look at this well, this anig, and it creates such a delight. Shir, and this creates an unbelievable pleasure and a delight. Talk about tzaddikim. It's not wasabi sauce that gives them pleasure. Wasabi on sushi or spicy mayo. They actually have a pleasure of looking at God. If we get a mushroom slice and maybe some hot peppers, if you like that, or whatever, or grilled onion with pizza and cheese, we're happy. It gives us pleasure. But these real people, they literally would get a high on gazing on the divine. And what they're really letting us in on a secret, that the pleasure that they have is the real pleasure, because it's boundless and infinite and without an end. And here's the beautiful thing. God wants this romance. He can't stand it when we're not paying attention to it. He's so frustrated because he so wants to be married to us and that we should want him. It's the poor husband, his wife doesn't want him. So he's going crazy. Okay, the men understand. And the woman is busy. She's tired. She's this, she's this. And the man wants the woman to want him. But she's out for lunch. It makes him crazy. So God is very frustrated, the fact that we don't want him, because he's really spectacular. Not a shlamazel like us. That's you can understand why she doesn't want him. But by God, he's really desirable. And yet, we have our heads in aioli sauce. So what do you expect? What's going to happen? So that's why God says, I'm willing to shine and illuminate and deliver myself into you, but I just want you to want me. I want it to be romantic. I want to see your pining. I want to see your excitement when I fill you with my light. And this is what it means. God says, I want you to be my dove. Like a pair of doves, that they look at each other. You know, doves can sit for hours and look at each other, and they are. That's one of the things about doves. First of all, they're mates for life. They're the most loyal couples in the animal kingdom, doves. But one of the things about them is that they can look at each other and they get tremendous pleasure just by looking. And the reason God created doves that way, because he wants to teach us romance a little bit. He says, look at the doves. And he says, I want you to look at me that way too. Come on, where are you? And this is the way prayer, God has created the infrastructure of prayer, the verses of songs. This is the contemplation. Everybody in accordance to their capacity. Baruch sha'amar v'haya olam. When you say, blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into being, allow yourself to be enamored by that. Look at what's beautiful in this world, and then imagine in the vision of your eye, imagine the word of God producing the sun, producing the sunset, producing the beautiful mountains and rivers and trees and forests and bugs and butterflies and envision it. And envision how with one utterance, all this beauty comes into existence. All the grass and all the trees and all the flowers and all the insects and all the oceans and all the billions of different types, millions of different types of fish that there are. And all this one utterance of God, and all of this is created. Can you imagine what God looks like? If in one utterance he creates all of this. So allow that to linger in your mind until you can see it. And every day he renews Maaseh Bereshis, the work of creation. That means that the creation is not one time. He's continuously renewing it with that one statement, but he's continuously renewing it. And then you take the Alter Rebbe is helping you take the meditation further. It says, blessed is the one who spoke. It doesn't say ubara olam, and he created the world. It says he spoke and the world came into being. What does that mean? That even the speech didn't work too hard to create the world. He just said it and it happened. The mashma memela, and implies that it happened on its own. That means God didn't even waste his words to create it. It's like the words, meaning the words don't have to, the words are not being drained into the creation. It just happened. God commanded and they came into being. When the words v'nivra'u, they were created on their own. We say you are before the worlds were created. And from when the worlds were created, implying that they were created on their own, as if there was no creator. That's the point. Meaning he's so free, this goes back to the point that we discussed in the beginning of the class today. God is so unfazed by what he's creating, he doesn't even take the tiniest flinch of his muscle. He didn't even have to contract one muscle to create because it all happens on its own. That's how infinitely above he is of the creation that he's creating. There's no comparison at all the worlds, because they're all finite. To the infinite one, he has no beginning and he has no end. And they're coming into being from him through powerful contractions, many and powerful. When he was creating, all he needed to do was reduce his energy and hide himself, not reveal himself. And to hide the light until worlds can come into creation. They were created. So that makes him so much more spectacular that it didn't even take even 1 ounce of his strength. How infinitely apart he is, and how he is concealed of everything. This is such an unbelievable, exciting thought of how awesome God is. I'm going to read this very fast because I know we got to finish over here. Because when the influence from the influencer to the recipient is in a manner of cause and effect, like we discussed in the beginning of the mimer, where the effect has a grasp in its cause, then the recipient knows where he comes from. Since God is creating us from a transcendental energy that is not invested inside of us, it's bigger than us, infinitely bigger than us. Therefore, it's as if we were dropped into the universe out of nowhere. And it's as if the universe dropped out of nowhere. We don't know our source. So the source is so much higher than us. There's no thought that grasps in it at all. That's what it means. It was created on its own. The worlds do not grasp the force that creates them and brings them into existence from nothing. Blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into creation. It says in the writings of the Arizal, the head that is not known. We don't know even who he is. As if something was found. Just like when someone comes across a lost object and you find it. You find a treasure. You don't know where it came from. It's as if it had no, right? That's the whole idea of a treasure. You found it, and it's yours because there's no relationship to where it came from. So to all of creation, all of existence is so nothing to the one who created it that it's as if there's no source. He is the source, but he's so infinitely above it as if there's no source. What is that telling you? After you have an unbelievable hoo-ha of the awesomeness of the creation, and you go crazy from its magnificence and from its beauty and from its boundlessness. And then you realize that all of it was created from one statement. And you realize that the one who said that statement, the statement itself is infinitely higher than what it stated, than the world that it created. You really, really get excited about the mystery of who he must be like. What is he really? And it starts creating an unsatiable, crazy madness of a love, of a yearning for that being to be revealed. And that's the love God wants of us. And when we love him in that way, and this love acts like a suction. When you experience this true love, you cannot have love for anything else left in you. Because what other value can anything have to draw your love? Imagine if you have the most powerful suction that's pulling you. It's I don't know how you would measure suction. You know, wind, you have 100 mile per hour wind. You have a hurricane wind pushing you. That's pushing. Imagine the opposite. It's pulling. 150 mile per hour suction. Now imagine 1,000,000 miles per hour suction. It's pulling at you. And then there is something else that is kind of like, does it stand the chance to grab your attention when you're being sucked in by this? Can't. So when someone is standing and appreciates the Ein Sof, and your love suddenly gets caught up with the Ein Sof, it literally sweeps up every other desire, and there becomes only a desire for one, and that's called achas. God says, I want your whole want. Don't give me that you want me and you want that a little bit, and 2 minutes later you want this, and it sounds like a very high level, but the truth is, if we would only practice it a little bit and try it. Chassidus is telling us the last 200 years, try it. Start thinking. You just don't want to think. Start thinking. Let yourself try this. Do it every day. It doesn't happen in a day. And the more you expand your meditation capabilities, you will reach a point that you will experience this. Masha in Kenya, verse of this, yeah. And this is the meaning of the verse when it says, Yahalo Shem Avaya Ki Hitziva. Praise the name Avaya Ki Hitziva, that he commanded. Vinivro, it was created on its own. The Hainu Shenivru, it was created Kadesh Yizgala Shem Hashem Umalchusay and his kingship. Upirish Ki Hitziva, Hainu Ki Dvar Melech Shilton, Ki Yom Avayei, V'chol Zem Meshakachol B'tzoyne Shem Melech V'loy Am. There's no king without a people, so he wants the creation. Hallelujah, Malochos. And then you continue and you say, let it praise him, all of his angels. Now you get even more excited. What's the greater excitement? You realize how in the higher realms of existence, they're all madly in love with him. Hainu Sham, only down here are we chasing all the foolish stuff. A little bit above our atmosphere, everybody is crazy with only one thing, and that's God. It's only in our dull, dark concealment where people are confused and chasing after the foolish things that we chase after. Hainu Sham Alachim, the angels, hem tamid bebitl. They're in a constant state of nullification, because they contemplate bisavusam in what creates them. Tamid me'ayin liyesh. They realize that they are being created constantly from nothing to something. Ukamaimer atar kadosh, like we say also in davening, you are holy, and your name is holy. Ukedoshim, and the holy ones praise you all the time. That means the angels are called the holy ones, and they're fixated on God. These are the angels. They praise you eternally. Their praise is constant. Because they are thinking. They're contemplating how God's name is above them, is removed from them. That which is bringing them into existence is beyond them, and they're so curious to know him, and they're pining to know him. When each and every one of us will take the time to contemplate during prayer, especially during the part of prayer the first part of prayer, which is called Fam Baruch Sha'amar Tu Yishtabach. It's called Psuke de Zimra, the verses of song. Ukriya Shema Birchaseh, and continuing into the Shema and its blessings. Al derech masha kasav based on what we discussed earlier, but to do it deeply. To gaze at the glory of the King. Then when you're going to say the Shema, then God will reveal himself in your soul. You're going to receive Yehuda Yizbarach, his unity. It's going to enter deep, deep, deep and fill your entire being, la'amita, in a true way. And you're going to come to a point where you're going to love him with all your soul, even if it means giving up your life for him. To you, God, I lift my soul. Because every person is able to come to such a level of Mesiras Nefesh, of wanting to dissolve yourself completely in him. Yisrael, and the reason we're able to, everybody's capable, because God planted a chip of himself in every soul. So, and the chip gravitates to its source. The spark always wants to reunite with its source. Ki nishmas Yisrael, because the souls of Israel, shar shalamai lamaila, is higher, is rooted above the universe, above creation. Like we say, the soul you have given to me, she's pure. She's coming from the higher supernal purity. And from this supernal place, the soul was drawn down into creation, but the soul is not of creation. Until God blew the soul into me, but the descent of the soul is for the sake of an ascent. God eventually is going to give the soul back. Since eventually my soul is going back to God anyways, I want to pick my entire life while I'm physically alive in a body, and I want to melt my life into God even during my lifetime. Why should I be involved in my lifetime chasing turtles, chasing stupidity, when instead I can chase the source of all sources and be unified with him? And because the soul root is so high, that's the reason why every person has the ability to completely give over his soul through the contemplation when we think deeply. Basically, the contemplation is only a means to activate your soul. Once you dig your soul out, your soul that's a spark of God, then it's going to happen already automatically. The soul is on fire for God. That's what the soul is. You just need all this meditation and contemplation so that you can turn on your soul. You can open yourself up to your soul. After you say, "Hear Israel," listen well. And when you listened well, and you received it well in your mind, and your understanding, Yehuda Yizbarach, God's unity, that He is one, and He's the only force in reality, and we realize that He is my God, because the child is the leg of the Father. So you realize how, in essence, we're one with Him. And then we realize how terrible it is that we're one with Him, and yet we're so stuck in this make-believe existence. And through this, the light of the soul reveals itself in the body, and that the concealments are no more hiding. And then also our human soul, which isn't the godly soul, our human mind will also agree that pursuing God is the only way to go. And that nothing could be competition to this reality. Even our human side, even our logical self, even our more human will agree that the soul's desire is the true and rightful passion and desire. And that should be the only obsession of the human being. And then we continue. After you say, love God with all your soul, what else do we say? With all my money. What does that mean? With all your money. Because the sages say that there are people who are willing to give physically, they're willing to endure, but they're not willing to give their money. Because they've become so identified with their money, with their possessions, that the money becomes more important than their own health. But people a lot of times will do foolish things, risking their health for their money. That means that you see how powerful a person's will is. A person can identify through their will with something so strong that their money becomes their. So what we're saying over here is ma gam. So therefore, but if once God becomes so much your reality, then you're willing to relinquish your money as well. And that means you're going to throw all your money to God. What does that mean? For godly things. You become so devoted that there's no point anymore to hold on to money for anything else. Money is only so that you can further your connection to God. So giving tzedakah and so. Magam, and to add to that, kikola mesiras nefesh eina b'poel. You always say, let's see, put your money where your mouth is, right? So the Alter Rebbe says, all this spiritual stuff, you're going out, you're melting in ecstasy, everything. It's all theoretically. It's all this. It's not down here in the practical. Are you really melting to God? Hand me the checkbook. Give me the card. Let's see. If there's no other reality but God, then make it real in the most tangible way. How? Give your monies to God. Because basically everything until now is only a commitment. You want to give your life. You're not giving your life. You're still physically alive in your body. You're not giving up. You're saying, hypothetically, I'm ready to give my life up for God. But let's make it real. But after prayer, when you're so excited, you take your money and you give more than you would generally like to give because you're fired up with God. And then you are taking the Mesiras Nefesh. You're taking the fact that you're saying, I'm willing to relinquish myself for God. So much so that I'm giving my monies away, which is so dear to me. And when you give, sometimes giving money is like literally chopping a limb off. For people whose money becomes their identity, it's literally giving your money is like chopping pieces of yourself. And if you're really loving God, are you willing to do that? Because you worked hard for your money. A person worked hard with their physical body, with the physical labor and their soul. And because of the mitzvah of Hashem, and this is called Mesiras Nefesh because you're giving a piece of yourself. And the sages say that if you killed something halfway, it's as if you killed it completely. So if you're sacrificing yourself, even just a part of yourself by giving away your money, it's as if you sacrificed your entire being for God. Now we're holding almost to the end. We're almost there. Almost there. We have a little bit longer. One side. And after you've received God's truth inside Lias Vahafta, you want to get to love Him with all your soul and with all your might. Now you've revealed the inside of your soul. And now you are the recipient so that God can now manifest Himself. Where will He manifest? He will manifest after the prayer when you study Torah. Because in prayer, you're conveying your desire to melt into Him. And then after you finish praying, you're silent and you're letting Him communicate Himself to you. In Torah, God is communicating Himself to us. Prayer is our love letter to God, our romantic gesture to Him. Torah is Him taking over. One is my dove. You've now received the echad. And that's why in the Shema itself, we map out what happens next. What do we say? After you finish speaking about the love, what do we continue? God, we say, and it will be these words that I am commanding you today. Which words? The words of Torah. You should speak them. So what does that mean? Because when you're speaking the words of Torah, God is saying, I am entering you. I am now speaking in you. Now God is downloading the infinite light that surrounds all worlds. Lamata is being downloaded below. God is now revealing himself into the world al yedei esek Torah through the study of Torah. Shal yedei zeh mamshichen, through this we draw down liyas yichud kutche berichu shchintei. We bring down the yichud that God is now unifying with this Shekhinah. Kenis kaliel barichus, as we explained earlier at great length, Shisha Heimo Malochos, when we spoke about the 60 queens. Which isn't the case when we learn Torah. What happens when a Jew is just learning Torah? Without this Hasidic prayer, without this deep, powerful, fervent prayer. You can't say there is no godly flow in this Torah, but it's much, much less. Lo yamshich kol kach. You're not drawing down so much gili orin seif. The godliness of this person's Torah is not so powerful. Baruch hu asayv kalalma. The encompassing infinite energy that's flowing is not flowing to that degree in the learning of Torah when it's a dry run, when it's a learning without this pumping, without this passion. That's why it is precisely through the one is my dove, Shua Mesiris Nefesh, which is the sacrifice, and the rising up from above upward. When the unity of God is felt in our hearts, that to the point that we see Him as the only reality and we don't want anything else. Then there can be the download the Esek Torah through this Torah study, which the Torah is coming from the higher infinite light that surrounds the world, so that it should be the voice of my beloved. He's coming, behold, he is coming, and he's skipping over mountains. This is so beautiful. Hazas, based on this, we'll also understand when the Kohen Gadol goes up, when the high priest goes in on Yom Kippur to the Holy of Holies, he sprinkles the blood. And if you remember, he goes, Achas, Achas ve'yachas, Achas u'shtayim, Achas ve'shalosh. That's the way we sing it on Yom Kippur a bunch of times. Achas ve'yarba, Achas ve'chamesh. What is that? He's counting. And when he would go inside, he would bring the blood of the sin offering, and this was atonement for the entire Jewish people for all the sins of the entire year. He would sprinkle the blood one time upward and 7 times downward, and he had to count. And when he would count, he would go one. He would count one up, and then when he would sprinkle, in order that he shouldn't forget when he's going down, he would say, when he would begin the 7 sprinkles downward, he would count it like this. In addition to the 1 up, 1 down. In addition to the 1 up, 2 down. In addition to the 1 up, 3 down. He keeps on mentioning the 1 up. So, and he uses the word achas, which we said before. Achas is the essence of the soul pining for God. So now we understand. In order to Yom Kippur, we want to draw all the godliness that we missed during the year. We want to draw down on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the main day of drawing God into the world, of this unity, making up for all the lack of mitzvot all year long. What is required to pump the light? Required is the yearning from below. That's why we keep on mentioning, why will he come down once, twice, 3 times into all 7 elements of creation? Why will he come down? Because of the achas. We pin it all back to the yearning. God says it's your yearning to me that I'm responding to. So this is what he's saying. Well, that is a human 1 up. And according to Kabbalah, the 1 up is Bina. Bina is called above. Sheva Lamata are the 7 emotions. So what's Bina? In the human being, Bina is our contemplation that makes us yearn for God. Like we said before, when we meditate, that's our Bina. That creates the upward yearning. The 7 emotions are the divine descent to reveal himself to us. 1 up, keser, or achas v'achas chachmem bina, achas v'sheva, bina chagas nehim. Actually, I was learning that the First, he says Sheva Lamata are the 7 emotions, but then he gives another pirush. Achas is the keser, the crown. Achas v'achas is chachma and bina, which is called achas v'achas. Achas v'sheva is bina, is the achas, and the 7 is chagas nehim, the 6, 7 emotions. But the point over here is we're drawing the light down through all the spheres. But where are we going to? To the keser, to the Orin Sof. Achas lamaylu ha-mesiris nefesh, the Knesset Yisrael, is our mesiris nefesh. Shal zeh nemar achas le'ima, she is one to her mother. Heino shal yedei al yezdei zeh, through our mother, through our contemplation, through our bina faculty, we go up to our source l'sharshan. Yisrael olu b'machshava, the Israel rises up in its source. And through this ascent upwards, the Orin Sof descends downward, through Chachma, ad Malchus Tatzilus, through the Malchut, through all the 10 Sfirot, Makar de Biyah, the source of the 3 lower worlds of Bria, Tzir, and Asiya. That's why he keeps on repeating the Achas. Ki Allah, the Achas Yenasi, because the whole power to draw it down into every level is from the ascent that happens by the achas. This is the cause that this higher infinite light should come down into all the 7 below. And this is the meaning going now. That was a parenthetical thought. And now he goes back, and that's the meaning. That I am commanding you today. We say these words that I am commanding you. And we're saying today God is commanding, because it's not something that God commanded us years ago. The point over here is we're opening up the channel for the constant flow of the infinite that's happening now. It's beyond time. So it's taking place right now. The Torah is just as potent as it was given at Sinai. It's a place that's above time. And over there, it's just turning that channel on. It's the same thing. That's why the sages say that every day the Torah has to be new. Even though the Torah was given already more than 3,000 years. Since through our self-sacrifice, we're tapping God's, the Soviv Kalalman, Misha Anochi. We're reaching God's very self. That which is the Soviv, surrounding all worlds. There's who's not within time. That's why as the beyond time enters time, what happens? Every day it's new. Because anything that's in time ages and gets a little stale. So when time is meeting beyond time, it's as if time is always at its freshest beginning. It's always fresh. It's right at the beginning. Because on the one hand, we're in time. But on the other hand, we're tapping beyond time. So it has the anti-aging effect, where everything is always in its absolute buzzing newness. It's drawn from a place that's beyond time. Now we'll understand why by the 10 commandments, God spoke the 10 commandments. Lamar, we should say it. We asked the question, to who should we say it? But now we understand. Those very same 10 commandments are continuously being spoken. And when we speak it, he is speaking it in us and through us. In the beginning of the 10 commandments, at first it doesn't seem to be understood its explanation. The explanation is that we should continuously read these words and say these words. Now as well, when a person is learning. It should be literally, literally, God is speaking right now. Literally, like at the time of the giving of the Torah. This is the truth. When you're learning, if we would be drawing energies that are part of time, then it would be an old statement. But if you're drawing from a place that's outside of creation, it's outside of time, that it's happening right now. It's outside. It's the Mishnah itself that's speaking. It's God speaking. We're just opening the channel to the radio of God, to God's channel, and he's speaking. And that is a constant. And this is that it says, Lamar, you should say, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Pidish. Shalei Eisek HaTorah b'Bechina Zu, when a person is learning Torah on this level, then I, God, you know what's going to happen? When you're going to learn Torah that way, then I, the infinite, the truest being, he is Elokecha, he's your power. That means your life is not your life. Your life is integrated and assimilated into the infinite. And therefore, you're one with the absolute being. It's in 1 second you exited the narrow, foolish nothingness of time and space and of the universe, of the world existence, and allow true existence to overtake you. And that itself became your existence within time and space. The true being, to become your God, she becomes your power. God becomes ours. He becomes completely unified with us. This is the marriage. Like a husband and wife become one entity. We become one with God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu shayne connect. God learns along with us. And that means God has a home in the lower worlds. And that's why the Torah can't become old. Like at the time of the giving of the Torah, since it's from outside of the range of time. And then what does Hashem say? One is my dove. Tamasi means two things. Tamasi means you complete me. What do we mean we complete God? Because God is lacking. Because God has a desire to have a home in the world. He created the world and he emanated from himself a real desire to have a home in the world. He can't make himself that home. The home in the world means we need to invite him in. We need to participate that he should have a home in this world. When we make ourselves the home for God to be, we complete his desire. So we complete him. When a person has a desire, an unattainable desire or a unfulfilled desire, then a person is lacking. There's like a piece missing. God is, so to speak, missing until we complete him. So we're called his completer. We completed him by doing this. This is so much deeper.
Is he like a Jew who is never satisfied? There was once more.
And Hashem is that way as well. And we could complete that desire for him, and then we are making him whole. We also, Tamasi also means we're his twin. We become like inseparable, like Siamese twins. The Jewish people then, as a result of this Torah study, caused the perfection in God. The unification between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mashu Kadosh Muvdal. He is on his own, he is separated and cannot be present in the world because he's above. And we draw him down to unify in the parameters of the world. On his own, he can't reveal himself in the world because the worlds would become nullified if he would reveal himself. But through the channels of Torah, there could be this unity, and therefore it could be his completion and his perfection. First, we need to dissolve ourselves. How can we stretch to receive him? How can we stretch to receive him? If he's infinite and we're finite, how can we stretch? But when we exit ourselves with total nullification, we cease to be finite anymore. Because the moment we broke out of our wants of this and we dissolve into him, then we stepped out of our limitations. Then we have the capacity to absorb him and bring him back down into the parameters. We serve as the link. Our Mesiras Nefesh. This enables the revelation. Tamasi to umasi. That's why we're his twin. She is, and the verse in Song of Songs continues. She is pure to those to one who give birth to her, as clear as the sun. Because when we do this, our bodies and our physical existence becomes completely transparent, and it's no more blocking the infinite light. So much so that our physical being, the physical world, will not block anymore. Darkness, the stuffiness of the world, the thickness, the density of the world that blocked the infinite is no more blocking. The darkness becomes completely converted to light, and the physical is one with the infinite. And it becomes like a clean window where the light passes through. The beginning is wedged in the end, and the end's in the beginning. The infinity of God gets wedged in the end, and the lowest point of existence, which is the physical world, it contains and facilitates the highest. Ra'uhu banois v'yashrua. The rest of the women see her, the rest of the girls see her, and they will certify her. They will praise her. The Zohar explains what this means. The Yashru means, and then the highest level of pleasure is revealed. Asher means, so certification doesn't mean only certification, but the Yashrua, they will impleasure her, which it means the revelation of the supernal pleasure, which will come after this job is finished. It's because if you have a desire and it's not complete, then you don't have pleasure. And when that desire has finally been completed, then it's... So that's the delight that will happen after this union is completed through all the Torah that we learn throughout all of time. And Mashiach comes, and as a result of that, we have a complete fusion and a unity. Then the pleasure will be revealed. With this, we conclude this awesome, incredible discourse about the awesomeness of Torah study and who wins the prize for the marathon. The Christ. They sat it through. They were thinking already a bunch of times, what is the moment to escape? When are we going to hit but they managed. I'm impressed.